Milked to death, the franchise that went from iconic to embarrassing. SpongeBob. Steven Hillenburg wanted no spin-offs and did his best to steer the ship of his creation in his later years. Now there's 2 spin-offs, both are bad, and Nickelodeon has no plans on stopping, with no creator to tell them no. For those curious, Steven had a set of rules he put in place for the show, such as no spin-offs, no revealing what the Krabby Patty secret formula is, and SpongeBob can never get his boating license. They literally waited for him to die so they could start making these spin-offs. It's absolutely disgusting behavior. I didn't know about any spin-offs, but I've googled and oh boy. There's a spin-off called Camp Coral that's all the characters as kids at a summer camp, and some as counselors. Let's also point out the fact that this completely negates the events of the actual series, since most characters didn't meet as kids. There's also a Patrick spin-off that's just started. It's straight up called The Patrick Star Show. Did you know that Total Drama Island has a baby spin-off? Not cool, dudes. Sharknado. It was funny the first time, but I was horrified to learn they made 6. Highlight of the whole series was in 3 or 4 when heavily pregnant Tara Reid was eaten by a shark in space, and the offending shark crash landed on Earth. Everyone was like, oh no, Tara's dead. And then Tara Reid cuts a hole in the side of the shark and pushes her newborn baby she'd birthed inside the shark out the hole. There are meaningful life events I have very hazy recollections of, yet I remember that moment clear as yesterday. Ted Bundy. Not a franchise per se, but every time I see a new movie coming out with some former teen heartthrob playing him, I want to hurl. I liked the Zac Efron one, he really nailed it. However, it teed me off that they didn't talk about the more gruesome aspects of his murders, like the consumption and desecration of the bodies. They should really tell the whole story or nothing at all. I also liked the documentary where the real Liz talked about her experiences. I love the Netflix documentary where they spoke to a woman who went to camp with him and she was just like, oh, Ted? Yeah, he was a frickin' idiot. A nice change from the almost worshipping and fascinated tone that other people speak about him with. Yeah, the fact that we go out of our way to encourage the whole hot guy element of this person you would never want to meet is pretty crazy. Like, okay, have someone appropriately handsome to go with the cautionary tale, I guess, but don't forget to accurately frame the length and breadth of all the awful things they did. Okay, The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, The Walking Dead World Beyond, The Walking Dead Origins, 3 confirmed Walking Dead movies, The Walking Dead Red Machete, The Walking Dead Torn Apart, The Walking Dead The Oath, Carol and Daryl spin-off, title TBA, Fear the Walking Dead, Flight 462, Game Time, The Walking Dead Road to Survival, The Walking Dead Season 1, The Walking Dead Season 2, The Walking Dead Michonne, The Walking Dead A New Frontier, The Walking Dead The Final Season, The Walking Dead Survival Instinct, The Walking Dead Overkill's The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, The Walking Dead Onslaught, The Walking Dead Dead Reckoning, The Walking Dead Assault, The Walking Dead Road to Survival, The Walking Dead No Man's Land, The Walking Dead Left Behind. Honorable mentions, The Talking Dead, all the comics I guess. I bet I'm missing stuff too, honestly. Update. Yep, I missed some things. MTG Secret Lair, The Walking Dead Bridge Constructor, The Walking Dead Ride, and The Walking Dead Slot Machines. And if you want to count it, Ride with Normal Readers. It's called Ride with Norman Readers, but the author wrote normal, and that made me laugh. Nickelodeon needs to leave the Fairly OddParents alone. I dropped it for good pretty much after that dog came, which they later removed from the show. Now they've got this new girl, Chloe, who just like the dog, didn't make the show better in my opinion. You remember Ice Age? So many damn sequels, even as a kid I thought it was too much. You want something to binge? The Land Before Time has 14 movies. Today I learned that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg executive produced only the first one. Anytime someone wants me to guess their favorite movie, I just go through all of the Land Before Time movies. Eventually they get annoyed and just tell me. You have to appreciate the dedication to the bit involved in having all 14 titles memorized and ready to go. The Kissing Booth. 13 Reasons Why. More like 13 Seasons Why. I don't know, the progression from the aftermath of the girl's tragic end to a mentally ill person talking to the ghosts of 2 offenders during a fake school weapon event felt extremely natural to me. If I didn't know you were talking about the show, I would wonder if you'd had a stroke remembering Sixth Sense. Kardashian or Jenner anything. This is something that's been bothering me for years. The progressive commercials with Flo. What the frick are they still doing making these? Some sociologists found that the literal pain response of advertising cringe sticks in our memory better than commercials that are purely informative, and they're easier to make than commercials that are actually enjoyable. The Bachelor and the Bachelorette, and multiple spin-offs. Why so many shows about people trying to hook up? That's a Saturday night. Grey's Anatomy. My brother convinced my dad and I to watch it. We got all the way through season 12 until we were like, screw it, this show is just dog crap. I'm forcing myself to watch it at this point. Just Jesus, if all your original main characters are dead or gone, just quit the frickin' show already. Terminator. I can actually respect the third one and Salvation, that while bad, they had a good premise. But Genesis was doing a 180 over the shark. And then they followed it up with Dark Fate, a franchise almost 40 years old, and Arnold is in damn near all of them. The only thing I can say about that is at least they didn't go the de-aging route. And after all that time, they still haven't shown how the war ends. Law and Order. Law and Order Criminal Intent, Law and Order Special Victims Unit, Law and Order Trial by Jury, Law and Order Los Angeles, Law and Order True Crime, Law and Order Organized Crime. I'm starting to think that the 2001 SNL skit Law and Order Parking Violations Unit wasn't a skit so much as a trial balloon. Despicable Me and the minions that have been milked like heck since 2010. I still think it's being pumped out, but those little yellow Tic Tacs curdled years ago. It really says a lot about the oversaturation of minions and memes and marketing that it feels like an incredibly milked dry franchise when it only has 3 films and a spin-off. Not that that's a small amount of films, but it feels like there's been 20 of them. The Purge. I will say the cowboy screaming, "It's the forever purge!" in the new trailer makes me cackle, so that's something. FIFA. I don't play it, but my friends who do tell me nothing changes. They're not going to stop that golden goose, though. SpongeBob Seasons 1 through 3 and all the meme templates that it spawned will forever be something I'll cherish. I wish it ended after the original movie. I think Steven Hillenburg is rolling over in his grave over how the show and movie franchises are now. The Saw series. We don't need 15 more hyper-unrealistic torture techniques and a drawn-out plot that makes no sense at this point. Please stop. Not to mention the crazy effects going on when the games are rolling. It's as if the editors took these scenes, tested every video effect, sped it up, and then forgot to choose one and delete the rest, so they left them all in. The Hangover was perfect. Shouldn't have milked it at all. Yeah. The third movie ruined Andy in the office as well. It's almost impressive that they screwed the man across 2 popular things. Ben 10 has been massacred, man. The original series will always be the best. Also, Boruto is not very good, if not bad, to be honest. Grand Theft Auto 5. It's been 11 years and we still haven't gotten a new game yet. Online is the cash cow for Rockstar Games. GTA 5 has been on 3 PlayStations, and meanwhile, the PS2 had 3 GTAs. Remember when they said that also includes stocks and multiplayer at one point, so people could invest in fake brands in-game and then impact them by blowing up cars and robbing those banks and stores, and making and losing real money that way? The Walking Dead. The show has run its course. Let it die already. But isn't the point that they can't die? Is it still running? What the frick? I stopped after seasons 4 and 5. Literally the same each season. Runs into group ends up being bad, they kill someone, they fight said group, zombies come in right after, run to new location, run into another group, rinse and repeat. 90 Day Fiancé, 90 Day Fiancé the other way, 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days, 90 Day Fiancé happily ever after, 90 Day Fiancé what now, 90 Day Fiancé pillow talk, 90 Day Fiancé just landed, 90 Day Fiancé self-quarantined, 90 Day Fiancé just landed, 90 Day Fiancé self-quarantined, 90 Day Fiancé B90 strikes back, 90 Day Fiancé happily ever after strikes back, 90 Day Fiancé 90 days bears all, 90 Day Fiancé the other way strikes back, 90 Day Fiancé love games, 90 Day Fiancé The Single Life, 90 Day Journeys, 90 Day Diaries, Darcy and Stacey The 90 Days spin-off, The Family Chantel spin-off. There may be a few obnoxious lists in this video, folks, as people seem determined to lay out the receipts for just why their show is as bad as they say. Not that they had to do that. Some franchises would have had the stink of mediocrity just from their name recognition alone. Case in point, The Real Housewives of Orange County, The Real Housewives of New York City, The Real Housewives of Atlanta, The Real Housewives of New Jersey, The Real Housewives of DC, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, The Real Housewives of Miami, The Real Housewives of Potomac, The Real Housewives of Dallas, The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, The Real Housewives of Melbourne, The Real Housewives of Sydney, The Real Housewives of Vancouver, The Real Housewives of Toronto, Les Vrais Housewives, The Real Housewives of Athens, Felicegek Luxus Kvittelben, The Real Housewives of Napoli, The Real Housewives of Nairobi, The Real Housewives of Auckland, The Real Housewives of Johannesburg, The Real Housewives of Durban, The Real Housewives of Cheshire, The Real Housewives of Jersey, The Real Housewives of Mars, The Real Housewives of Uranus. TLC. Just shut the whole network down. I love how TLC stands for The Learning Channel, and it's as bad as the History Channel in that regard. I'm sorry, hillbillies finding logs in the bayou and ancient aliens is not history. It was better when it was the channel about America in World War II, and even then it wasn't that great. Call of Duty. At this point, I'm just waiting for COD early warfare where the campaign is you murdering hapless Neanderthals with throwing spears, and the multiplayer is a mess of rage nerds running through a historical torchlit cave network, quick-scoping each other with lengths of sharpened wood. Give me 13 reasons why that show had a second season, forget a third and fourth, possibly a fifth, when the protagonist dies at the end of season 1. The Simpsons is clawing at its life support machine, begging to be put out of its misery. It's one of my all-time favorite shows, yet I've seen less than half of its episodes. Stop! They're already dead! You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? High School Musical, the series.
Actually, the title is ridiculous, but it's not actually that bad. It's filmed office style and it's pretty funny considering how it's a show for kids and teens. No joke, season 1 is very tongue-in-cheek and has some of the best music I've heard in a while, like acoustic cover song music. I stopped watching 3 episodes into season 2 because I got bored and it feels like the writers already told the story that they wanted to tell in 1.
Naruto. OG anime and Shippuden have tons of filler just to keep the anime going in a weekly format. After Naruto ended, they launched Boruto, where the main antagonist, at least at the beginning, is an alien, and that's just too much. You can skip 100 or almost 100 episodes of Naruto towards the end before Shippuden, and it's like if nothing in between ever happened, and you leave off with Naruto in the hospital, and start up at the halfway point of the episode with Naruto in the hospital, like they only talk about a filler character once. It was so insane to me that you could just skip so many episodes and not miss a thing back when I watched it. And then like half of Shippuden is flashbacks to the point where they become a meme during its run. Like, remember the swing? It appeared in the final episodes. It's to the point where I can predict where an anime is going to do a flashback scene, because it seems plenty of them learned it from Naruto. Not really a particular franchise, but Disney is doing way too many live-action remakes of their classics. Also, the Toy Story franchise. Toy Story isn't being nearly as milked as other franchises. Pixar maintained its high standard of quality in all 4 movies. Even though Toy Story 3 would have been a good ending point, and Toy Story 4 was very different, it's still a good movie. The Fast and the Furious. Do we really need a dozen or almost a dozen movies? Ask me again after F12, Gravitational Assist Maneuver. They have to make one where they drive so fast that they end up time-traveling to the past and then they race with old-timey cars. Fast and Furious. Blast from the past. Or maybe just Past and Furious? In the first movie, they were stealing VCR players. There needs to be one where they're like all old and grey, the slow and the mildly peeved, and then you pulled the plug already. Transformers. Oh, you'd better mean the movie franchise, otherwise I'll respectfully disagree with your opinion on a franchise I love. I haven't watched The Simpsons in over a decade, but I always saw commercials for new episodes. So one night I was flipping through channels and saw it on. Figured I'd just watch it and see how the story and series had progressed. Dear God, it was awful. They took the theory of Flanderization and just ran with it. At this point, all of the characters were just the most distilled versions of themselves. Homer is just a self-centered buffoon, Marge is a helicopter mum, Lisa's an obnoxious know-it-all, and Bart is a mixture of pranks and millennial buzzwords. The jokes were boring, flat, and ill-timed. The supporting cast were just one-liners that served to move the uninteresting story along, etc., etc. How is this show still on? They do a thing a lot now where someone will do something out of the ordinary, and instead of letting the audience work out what's meant to be funny, another character explains what's crazy about it. I'm not describing it very well, but that's basically The Simpsons now. Predator and Alien. They could have been good, but weren't, and Predator's sequels were especially bad. Maybe they should just fight each other. That'll breathe life into the franchise. We got a damn good arcade game and FPS from those games. I'd take another Alien Isolation-style game as well. As much as I love the John Wick series, I think it'll probably get milked just because people love it. Hopefully not, but time will tell. American Idol and The Masked Singer and America's Got Talent or America Wants to See Your Poop Hole. These shows are cringe and have been for the past 20 years. They need to stop. The DC-verse on the CW. Ted Bundy movies. We as a society should have progressed past the need for Ted Bundy movies. Fast and Furious. Sorry to my family in advance. Pokemon's getting there, and Harry Potter was fine as a book and movie, but a musical? Not a franchise, but a person. Conor McGregor. Now that he's solved in terms of MMA and no longer looks like a world beater, not to mention an injury that guarantees he'll never be the same again, the UFC is pretty much only going to use him for his name ID and sell as many pay-per-views as possible until his obnoxious fan club realizes they've hitched their wagon to a perennial loser and insufferable prick. He'll be squeezed for every last drop of his vitality by the UFC, but he'll still make tons of money to get beaten to a pulp by hungrier, more focused fighters. One can only hope he's invested some wisely though, because once the rubes realize he's washed up, those million-buy PPVs are gonzo. And good riddance. He's an awful human being. Screw Conor McGregor. The best description of Conor's late career I ever came across was in some YouTube comment section, I think. He's lost what made him great. Poverty. He's too rich to be a good fighter anymore, and just mails it in. Believe it or not, this answer was actually submitted before McGregor's presidential campaign in Ireland was launched, so I think we can safely say that the milking is getting painful even for those of us who don't watch MMA and whose nips aren't actively being pulled. Please know, I know that this is the stupidest timeline, but we're not ready for that presidency. And if you're just now finding out that he has a serious political campaign, I'm sorry. Okay. So, in the short span of time between recording this video and editing, Conor McGregor has actually ended his Irish presidential election bid. And thank frick for that. One less stupid thing going on in the world. The entire Arrowverse, which was unfortunately bad from the beginning, but we didn't see it until now. Much as I love the series as a whole, the mainline Pokemon games have been going downhill in more recent years. Sure, they're still very fun to play, and they're a great way to play with friends, but something about the newer ones, I'm looking at the base game Sword and Shield games, feels so lifeless and disingenuous. It's like the life has been sucked out of them and they've become this linear hand-holding tour rather than the explore until you're tired of it and then explore some more style that it used to have. I'm really hoping the Gen 4 remake brings back some of the good stuff Sword and Shield's DLC brought in. Otherwise, they're just milking a dead horse at this point.
Is The Walking Dead still on?
Shockingly, yes. I always wondered who the frick was watching that, only to go visit my parents and see them still watching it. This was last season, but I was still baffled they kept up with it. Too many Fast and Furious. When you can name a movie F9 and it's still recognizable, that's a problem. Call of Duty Finest Hour, Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty Big Red 1, Call of Duty 3, Call of Duty Roads to Victory, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare DS, Call of Duty World at War, Call of Duty World at War Final Fronts, Call of Duty World at War DS, Call of Duty World at War Zombies, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Mobilized, Call of Duty Black Ops, Call of Duty Black Ops DS, Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 Defiance, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, Call of Duty Black Ops 3, Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, Call of Duty World War II, Call of Duty Black Ops 4, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Call of Duty Warzone, Call of Duty Mobile, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Supernatural. The first 5 seasons were fun, but it ended up getting dragged out way too long and turned into an incomprehensible disaster. Dean dies and disappears. Oh, he's back. Sam dies and disappears. Oh, he's back. They fight and split. Oh, they made up. Repeat for 384,739,363 seasons. Star Wars. Disney should have skipped making episodes and just stuck with Star Wars stories. Grand Theft Auto 5. Family Guy. It just isn't funny anymore.
Hey Lois, remember that time a guy on Reddit said our show wasn't funny anymore?
Flashback to a cartoonishly ugly version of the narrator recording this video. American Dad is way better and it's actually funny, although that too has been going on quite a while now. All of the Terminator films after 2 don't exist. The cell phone industry. They should do a phone release every 3 years, not every 4 months. In fairness, the flagships are usually once a year. The phones released in between them are usually lower spec models for different consumer markets. Besides, not everyone upgrades at the exact same time. Technology does improve enough to warrant a newer model. Now, if you'd said people shouldn't be buying new phones that frequently, I'd agree. Jurassic World, and especially its sequels and any planned spin-offs, don't need to exist. Nothing else has come close to the magic or spirit of the original. This is an unpopular opinion, but superhero movies as a whole, they're going to become like westerns, and they're going to be so bloated and oversaturated that people are going to stop making them. But by the looks of things, that's not going to be anytime soon. I'm actually very curious when that will happen. I mean, superhero films and shows have pretty much been the past 20 years at this point, with some of that even going back to the 90s, really. Selena. Not going to say how I know, but I know for a fact her dad is a pathetic, money-hungry butthole. Always has been and always will be. First, he forced his children to practice in a band that none of them wanted to be in to help make money for his restaurant. Then he controlled her career in almost every way, controlled her love life, hired a convicted felon to be her fan club manager. She was convicted of embezzlement, the very thing she did to Selena, which Selena confronted her about. Then that very same felon sticks her hand in the cookie jar, surprised Pikachu face, and is caught red-handed. Shoots and kills Selena. Refused to save her life by agreeing to a simple blood transfusion, yet she was married and nobody contacted her husband to ask him what to do. And finally, continues to make money off his dead daughter in every way possible. He was a smart man and I feel like he got away with a whole lot. I have family that know him personally who agree with me. I hope that's enough context. Assassin's Creed for sure. I found AC to be weird and uninteresting when they shifted from the Assassins vs. Templars story to the First Civilization nonsense. And now we have literal gods and mythical creatures running around. It sucked the immersion right out of it for me. Assassin's Creed was great because I felt like I was exploring Jerusalem in the Crusades or Venice during the Renaissance, and the feeling of all that had important historical implications. Now we have Kill Medusa, and it's such a bizarre direction to take after the first few games tried so hard to maintain historical accuracy. World of Warcraft. I know it hasn't been milked recently, but the X-Files. The truth is no longer out there, and it breaks my heart. Anything Disney owns. They've run out of ideas, so just draining their franchises dry with remakes seems to be the way to go. Bow to the mouse. Fortnite. Its prime is over, but they think they can just buy their way back by adding everything from Halo to God of War to Aliens. The Sims. I don't even want to know how much money it would cost for all expansions for just Sims 4. Hot take, anything you can think of as a franchise. If there was an award for worst co-worker ever, who would you nominate? I was working as a cashier for a grocery store. Had an awesomely friendly boss who was always quick with a joke and great with customers. She also counted the drawers and handled the front of the store. My drawer came up $20 short one day, never happened in the year I was working before that, and I got pushed in front of the store manager without any defense. I could pay it out of pocket or get written up. I couldn't afford the $20, so I took the write-up. Broke high school kid that had to pay car insurance. My boss goes on later and starts talking about watching out for quick change artists. Yeah, that must have been it. A customer who was being sneaky. Fast forward 3 months, and I quit because of a crappy raise. The crappy raise was because of said demerit, and I went to work elsewhere. A few months later, she was arrested and fired for stealing from the tills to feed her lottery habit. In short, nice people in authority who F you over and let you take the fall. When I was 16, I worked at Wendy's. One day, I went in to find out that I was training someone. I was working the back window, and as I'm training her, she starts filling me in on her situation. She was a recovering smack addict who'd just been released from jail for theft, and was living in a halfway house. She was also 40 years old and kept on hitting on me, asking if I'd ever been with a woman, telling me constantly how cute I was. I thought I'd have to get a new job. But 2 days later, the addiction won out and she ran out the door with $100. The funny thing was, had it just been the money, she would have just been fired. But since she ran out with the work walkie-talkie, she was charged with a felony. Those things are stupidly pricey.
She just couldn't understand the four-corner press method.
Easily the bisexual love triangle that I had to deal with while working at Arby's in college. One of my managers, female, had just split with her husband, so she started doing the deed with one of the kitchen hands, who was male. When that went sour, she started hooking up with one of the female employees. Ordinarily, this wouldn't be a problem, except the male kitchen witch still clearly harbored feelings, which led to some nasty shouting matches during work hours. They'd try to pull the other employees into it and get us to take sides. I was all like, "Screw you, I'm just trying to slice roast beef." Okay, this is a fake story. There's no way they actually have roast beef to slice at Arby's. Okay, I don't know if it was actual beef or not, but we definitely put something on the deli slicer. Ah, well, at least I hope your nondescript meat slicing was done in a place where you had a great view of the sheer drama ongoing before your eyes. I kind of love hearing about this sort of stuff in hospo, but at the same time, I really don't envy someone who was there in person. I was a swing manager at McDonald's in high school. We had one employee, Johnny, who just didn't want to do any work. He was in the kitchen, so his duties were to cook, prep, clean, and restock. His favorite thing to do was prep. Ask the man to make a Big Mac and you'd get the worst sandwich ever. Ask him to slice tomatoes and you'd get perfection. Anyways, one day we're really busy and I'm helping out in the basement with an inventory order. Johnny comes downstairs and his hand is sliced, like down to the bone, bleeding everywhere. It looked like he'd put his hand in the tomato slicer and just smashed it onto his hand. Thing is, he was so calm, he almost looked pleased with himself. We sent him home thinking that was that. He strolled out, said goodbye to his coworkers, and then we never saw or heard from Tommy again. That night I was sorting out all the tills to take the dailies to the safe drop at the bank. We're missing nearly $5,000 in cash from the manager's safe. Never happened before, never happened again. Don't know how he did it, really. I used to work for a full body donation facility. Like you donate your body to science. We'd cut it up and send your different parts to researchers all over the world. In this facility, we had lots of gurneys to transport the 7 or 8 bodies we received a day. We'd also cut up the bodies on the gurneys, which meant these things were disgusting. We cleaned them, but still. My coworkers and I began noticing that some of the gurneys weren't always in their rightful place when we opened shop in the morning. Immediately, you think, ghosts. Nope. Turned out 2 employees were always staying late and doing the deed on them. I am not bullcrapping you, sadly. They didn't get fired for it. They did get fired eventually when they forged letters to their welfare agent saying they got paid below a certain amount of dollars and still needed welfare, which was a lie. They signed the bottoms of the letters, each claiming to be the other's boss. The kind of people who complain about not getting enough hours week after week, but when you do schedule them the extra hours, they call out. In fairness, one of my old jobs went about this the wrong way. We'd ask for extra hours, sure, but then they'd say 20 minutes before you leave, "Do you want to work an extra 4 hours today?" No one does. I've made plans around my work schedule now.
Well, you always say you want more hours, but then you turn them down when I offer them.
Whoa, wait. I signed up for every bank holiday, worked 28 days of December, and I accept all overtime with advanced notice. You can't just ask me to delay my plans by 4 hours when I'm supposed to set off and meet friends and family in the next half hour. I know someone else who cries for more hours, shows up constantly late, and 2 hours ago just straight up ditched in the middle of the shift. She leaves the crew frantic, asks for shifts on the bulletin, and then never takes the ones she's offered. I share office space with a woman who's been working in our firm for 35 years now. Underneath her desk, she's got a banker's box half filled with at least 10 kilos of colorful rocks. One day, I decided to ask her about the rocks.
Oh, every time someone makes me really mad, they get a rock in my box so I can remember it.
You mean, all of these rocks represent somebody? She rummaged in the box for a second and pulled one out.
This is for the time the department secretary didn't invite me to her Christmas party, even though I gave her a present.
I picked one out at random. So who's this for?
Oh, well that one's for
It was for my old boss who retired circa 2003.
That witch. I told her not to hire that packy for accounting, and she got pregnant 6 months later. She should have listened to me.
I just stared at her. So, do I have any rocks? She just glowered at me for a second and then turned back to her newspaper. Maybe it's a therapy tool, so now, instead of flying into a murderous rage, she just gets a new rock. I once had a coworker who wouldn't do a damn thing if the boss wasn't in the store. If the boss wasn't there, she'd be on the store phone talking to her baby daddy, outside smoking, or out in the mall shopping. She'd do enough work to cover a 15-minute break if you complained long enough for one. However, if the boss was there, she was all over the customers like they were her new best friend and all in the boss's face saying, "Look at how well I work." I complained, naturally. He just said there was nothing he could do because he never witnessed any of the behavior. Well, one day, when she was pulling her BS, another coworker and I were hit really hard with a huge rush. She was supposed to be helping with handing out orders, making fries and drinks and whatnot. Instead, she was off on the phone talking about doing the deed loudly in earshot of the customers. I had a breakdown and just started crying. I turned around and yelled at her, saying something along the lines of, "No one cares about your stupid bedroom life. Not me, not my coworker's name, and not the customers. Either get up here and do your job or just leave now." She came to, quote, help, but with the worst attitude ever. As soon as the rush died down, I booked it to the back, grabbed the cordless phone and called the boss in tears. He agreed to do a stakeout and watched her from afar. She was fired. I was given a raise, but I quit 2 months later. There was this guy who used to bring in framed photos of various exotic wildlife and show them off to everyone in the break room. He'd launch into a long story about his trip to Africa or whatever country that week's animal supposedly came from. The thing is, they were all taken from the internet and printed on photo paper. If he bought in a Siberian tiger photo, I'd Google Siberian tiger, and bam, there it was, straight from a brochure for a Mexican zoo. I hated that guy. Just needed to get that sweet, sweet attention by any means necessary, didn't he? Feels like it would be fun to call that guy out on his crap, but I guess some of us are just surviving day to day without conflict, aren't we? At a previous job, I used to eat lunch in the break room with a friendly but very conservative woman. That didn't bother me, I just avoided hot-button topics. One day, I don't remember how it came up, she said, "All the gays and N-words should be sent to Mars." I ate my lunch at my desk after that. I worked the front desk. This coworker was fired recently. She was a lady who was on night shift audit. After a year and a half of her habits, I completely reformed my schedule to the morning shift just so I didn't have to be in contact with her like I did for the night. Night audit came in at 11 p.m. to relieve night shift, and my coworker would come in 5 minutes late on the dot. Due to an idiotic corporate policy that allowed this 5-minute courtesy, Hilton Hotel run by management company, franchised, there was nothing that the managers could do. So I and my partner are waiting with our drawers counted and drops ready for deposit as she lumbers down from the clock room. By the time she's counted her drawer and fully ready to relieve us, it's already 11:15 p.m. And it's not like we're sitting there twiddling our thumbs either, because during her leisurely preparation we're taking in money, checking in guests and constantly recounting the drawers just so we can minimize our delay in ending our shift. Otherwise, we either leave at 11:15 p.m. with everything in disorder, which isn't in my character, or leave at 11:40 or 45 p.m. She was a gosh darn awful front desk agent to boot. Mumbled to guests, was barely personable, but she survived slipping under the radar because she always met the minimum of expectations. She was fired on a technicality. She made a reservation at this hotel for her family without authorization, and I am glad she's gone. There are so many workers in the city that deserved her spot that she wastefully occupied for 7 years. We had a guy on the night shift who would clock in and then drive away and come back at the end of his shift and clock out. The manager was told multiple times but said, "I didn't see it, so I can't do anything." He did this for over a year. When I asked what was up, the manager said, "He has mama-baby issues." I'm guessing he was related to the manager or had information the manager wanted to keep quiet. I work in an engineering contracting firm. We mainly do electromechanical work from water-related projects. We had this one electrical engineer who had a major issue with the communication. I was his project engineer for one project and he would never, ever ask me anything or give me any information unless I asked for it. He'd never take on tasks unless I told him to do task X or Y. He never even communicated with the mechanical engineer, although for our projects there needs to be a lot of coordination. When we'd find out something went wrong on the electrical side, he blamed us for not giving him information, or he'd blame us for not asking him to confirm beforehand. Further, whenever I'd ask him for something over the phone, no matter how small, like confirmation or an instrument tag number, for example, he'd request that I write him an official email with the question. Needless to say, we messed up on every project he worked on. He was fired. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I once worked with a guy who genuinely believed cats could reproduce with rabbits and would argue at length about it almost every day. The first time I told him it was impossible, he searched "cabbits" on Google Images and said, "See, I told you." Maybe not the worst, but definitely the dumbest. Keep in mind, this guy was 32 years old. Dana. I can't stand Dana. Whenever you have any questions, she looks at you like you're crazy for asking. She gives you one of those looks like, "Seriously? You want me to do that?" It doesn't matter that what you're asking for is her specific responsibility. You can't ask her to do anything without her giving you grief back. She doesn't copy people on emails, so she'll go off and work on a team project with her different team while other people are doing the same thing. To top it all off, she's in marketing and unknowingly made our publicly owned company tagline a naughty bedroom joke. I still work at the company, and it would make it easy to recognize which one, so I'd rather not say right now. I know there are worse people out there, but this makes everyone's day-to-day suck. Also, she laughs like one of the hyenas from The Lion King all day. Worked with a painter who would constantly complain about anything and everything. "It's too hot, it's too cold, I've got too much work, not enough work, it's 4:30 and I have nothing prepped for the next morning, so I'm just going to send the rest of the team home and ride the clock until 5 so I can collect a larger share of the billed hours for the day. I'm going to go for lunch at 11:30 and come back at 1, and then announce to the whole shop that I'm leaving again to go let the dogs out. I love to make crude jokes insinuating that people are unspeakable act offenders or gay, or that they have to do the deed with animals, and it will be funny because I'm bigger than anyone else and I've been working here longer than anyone, so no one will do crap anyway. Someone makes a joke about me and I go crying to the owner that people are being spiteful and are out to get me." I quit after almost 2 years of hearing from that butthole. When I put in my resignation, the department head said that I had trouble working with people and that I'd upset a lot of the more senior employees in the shop. When I finally got out, I found out that Jeff had been talking crap about me to the manager the entire time that I worked there, and that he was excited to see me leave. I talked to several of the other employees a few months later, and Jeff is still talking about me. Everyone tells him to shut the F up and that he's the main reason I quit. They're all teed off because every person they've gotten to replace me has either been a complete failure or they're a total butthole. In short, this absolute jerk painter talks crap about me and everyone. Turns out everyone's teed off because he's the reason I quit. Sounds like a swell guy, totally giving tradies a bad reputation by his very existence. What a jerk. Oh god, David. I started working as a glass collector at this nightclub, and he'd been doing the job for about 6 months before me. This made him think he was essentially my boss, even though nobody had ever told him this, and despite the fact that I was clearly better at the job than him already. He'd do everything in such a stupidly overcomplicated and slow way, wasting so much time and generally causing the place to almost grind to a halt. The worst part was the fact that he seemed to have no concept of personal space though. I frickin' hate super touchy-feely people. The ones who keep telling you to do things when they have no authority over you. F you, Zach. But sometimes, I'm not saying that the guy is you, but you gotta tell them how to do things even though you've got no authority over that person. Otherwise maybe they screw up and you have to start over from scratch. I'm totally not Zach, by the way. Tough choice. Here are the nominees. First, there's the stinker. You get within 2 meters of this woman and your nostrils will be reminding you about it for the next 8 hours. Then there was the freak. Casually mentions how much he enjoys wearing his rear end plug to work. There was the spitter. He'd hock up a loogie and spit it in his desk side bin. I sat directly opposite him and I witnessed this show 20 goddamn times a day. Then there's the butt plunderer. Casually mentions how far he's had his arm up another man's rear the previous night. This guy was mid-40s, 6'6", bald and 140 kilograms. Nightmares were had. But the winner is the bleeder. The bleeder was mid-60s and on blood-thinning medication due to a heart attack a few years earlier. Unfortunately, this resulted in the tiniest scratch or bump bleeding for hours. In a very unfortunate turn of events, he decided to purchase white chinos. The results were not pretty, and given the amount of times he handed me back blood-smeared documents, he probably takes the cake. It sounds like the freak and the butt plunderer should get together. I'm gonna go with this crazy conservative Christian guy I worked with about 7 or 8 years ago. We were account managers for a telecom company and part of a team that specialized in a specific type of product. So there were 7 of us crammed into a small room in the back. This was back when Glenn Beck only had his stupid AM talk radio show, and this guy listened to it all day. We asked him to wear headphones, but he refused. He'd say weird, sexist quotes from the Bible frequently and wouldn't let his wife work, even though she was in the pharmacy business and we only made about $12 an hour at the time. Up until this point, the craziest thing he'd done was take off June 6, 2006, aka 666, to hide in his bunker. Then one day he was served a protective order against his wife and daughter and divorce papers all on the same day. This unlocked the true craziness. He started spending all day talking on the phone to lawyers and family members, either quoting even darker Bible verses and wishing his soon-to-be ex-wife was dead, or complaining about not having a bedroom life anymore. He then started saying that God takes care of hussies like his ex-wife, and when God does it, he wants pictures of his ex's body to show his daughter what happens when women don't obey their husbands. It all came to a head over striped socks. It was a typical morning. He was on the phone complaining to someone, and a girl came in wearing striped socks. We kind of laughed about it, and we were joking with her when suddenly crazy Christian guy slams his phone down and yells, "Oh great! Because you're all laughing in the background, the judge denied my visitation with my daughter." Another lady just made the comment, "Geez, Jeff, don't go postal." To which he replied in the coldest, flattest tone I've ever heard in my life, "Oh, I won't go postal. God will kill you all, and when he does, I'll be there to take pictures of your bodies to show my daughter what happens to hussies like you." When we told the supervisor, she laughed and then said, "What did you guys say to him? You know he's going through a hard time. You all need to be more sympathetic towards him." We threatened to put a restraining order on him, so they moved him out of the room, to the first desk outside the door. We had to walk past him and still heard the Glenn Beck show. I quit shortly after that, but to this day I keep a lookout in the news for the headline, "Man mows down office building with AK in one hand and a Polaroid camera in the other." I think the "be more sympathetic" line is so that they don't have to confront the dude. One of our adult learners at our company kept hitting on me and even started bringing in knives and hiding them around the place. He number oned and two'd with the bathroom door open and was generally creepy. The managers refused to expel him and said we should be more sympathetic because he was having a bad week. The dude quit of his own accord in the end after the managers relented and wrote him a letter stating that his conduct was inappropriate. The kicker was he was on the teaching assistant course. He was going to be working with young children. The funniest thing I've ever read on Reddit was one of those threads maybe a year ago. Somebody said a guy at his work would listen to Monster Mash loudly in their cubicle on a consistent basis. Not sure why, but that's hilarious to me just picturing that. It's simultaneously hilarious, but also, oh my god, even if I was in the same office as that person for 1 week, they would be my submission for this list. That big floozy Anne. My first job was at some small crappy grocery store, barely getting enough business to stay open. Anne was best friends with our manager and spent hours of the shift sitting and talking about the raunchy bedroom fun she had with her husband and taking frequent smoke breaks in between. She'd continuously use her 5-finger discount and steal anything she could get away with. One night, while her and I were forced to face the store, like pull every item on the shelves up to look all pretty, she said she was going to run to the beer store. Seeing that it was literally 10 steps away, I said fine. 3 hours later, after I'd finished and 20 minutes away from closing, she comes back half drunk. A couple of months later, she's got caught going into the computer system, changing the prices of meat so she could save money on steaks that were already on sale. In short, which of a coworker leaves for 3 hours and comes back drunk? That guy who made a major unwanted move on me. At first, he just struck me as a weird dude. He was overweight, 2 kids with his ex-girlfriend who he was still kind of with or something. I thought he was like 35, but apparently he was 26, and I was 19 at the time. He wasn't great at small talk, and he'd just tell me weird stuff all the time while I was on register. One day, he and I were on the closing shift with 2 others. While I have the last few customers in my line, he started talking to me, thus forcing me to ignore the customers for the most part. He was talking about how his baby mama saw me and him chatting after our shift last week, and she got all up in his face saying, "I know you effing that girl. I know you're effing her." To which I stood there staring at him having no idea what to say, and I said something like, "Well, you told her we're not, right? So it's not really an issue, right?" He then spent the rest of the shift telling me why he would F me, not date me or something respectful like that. He'd do it because I seem so chill about that kind of thing. So I guess he's saying I sound promiscuous. I let him know I'm seeing someone, which was half true. So we ended up having this awkward conversation about what my boyfriend does for a living, which turns into him telling me this guy I'm seeing probably just wants me for my body and doesn't actually give a crap about me. Finally, the shift is over and I escape. I call in the next morning to check my schedule and I'm told I'm closing with him again. So I tell my boss I would rather not work another closing shift with him because he was acting inappropriately. I didn't think it would turn into much of a thing, but he essentially was told not to speak to me unless it was absolutely necessary and completely business related. My boss told me if he so much as glanced at my butt to tell her immediately and she'd fire him on the spot. I quit a few weeks later to go back to school, and I heard he was fired for threatening to beat the crap out of my manager one day after he was accused of blatantly ogling a female customer's chest. So, he was a winner? What are some fascinating facts about serial unalivers? When police eventually came to the house of Ed Gein, they found an absolute pigsty. Gein had been living alone since the death of his brother in a barn fire, and it's speculated that Gein may have orchestrated this same disaster. Anyway, he had let much of the house go into disrepair. They found countless body parts from his various grave-digging excursions, including a bag of wilted organs and, of course, the infamous skin lampshade and a half-finished suit made of human skin. There were maggots living in old dishes in the kitchen. It was the kind of disorganized mess that you would expect from a man who spent his nights completely disconnected from reality. All except one room. His mother's room upstairs remained absolutely pristine, except for the dust that had collected and seemingly untouched from the time of her death years earlier. He had such a fear or respect for his mother that he was afraid to set foot in her room long after she had died. He claimed to hear her voice criticizing him from time to time. This was the central experience that inspired Norm Bates' character to maintain his mother's home and image in Psycho. Also, a fun fact about Gein. In Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle makes an offhand comment when leaving a diner that he had a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie with cheese on top. In exchange for details to investigators after his capture, Gein requested the same meal. Pee Wee Gaskins, most prolific serial killer in South Carolina, drove around in a hearse with a bumper sticker that read, "I haul dead people." He told people that he needed it to take the bodies of the people that he killed in his private cemetery. He claimed to have killed between 100 and 110 people. In the John Wayne G case, there were so many bodies crammed underneath the house that the bodies fused together and the bones had to be sorted for more than 2 years to put together the full skeletons. I think the fact that Ed Gein only killed 2 people is amazing because he's one of the most well-known serial killers. Jeffrey Dahmer gave the people in his apartment building sandwiches that could have possibly been made from his victims' flesh. I went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, not far from Dahmer's apartment building. When the news broke, my boyfriend at the time was riding the bus and a lady was freaking out and crying uncontrollably. She lived in the building and he'd apparently hosted cookouts regularly. I always think about the PTSD the first cop to open that refrigerator must have had. My goodness. I suppose that's one way to get rid of some of the evidence. Absolutely horrific to contemplate that there was even a tiny chance he might have eaten that. Nightmare fuel. Jeffrey Dahmer, towards the end, right before he got caught, had so many bodies in his apartment that he ran out of room and stored one victim in his bathtub. He then proceeded to shower over him every day for a month. Think about that, straddling over a rotten corpse to get fresh and clean for the day. Unreal. The serial killer, Baylor Kiss, liked to pickle people in barrels stored in his basement. Someone figured it out, but they couldn't get him because he was fighting in World War I. By the time they tracked him down, he had disappeared and left a dead guy in his hospital bed. He supposedly joined the French Foreign Legion and deserted that as well. And I think history loses track of him after that, with the exception of one possible sighting as a janitor in New York. The janitor disappeared before anyone could confirm it. I have a family member who briefly dated a serial offender of this nature, the first one to use the internet to find his victims. She almost, but not quite, fit the profile of his victims. One time, when he picked her up, the adult son was visiting the house, met him, and shook his hand. He ghosted her after that. Also, my mum was living in a mobile home park in Wichita during Dennis Rader, or BTK's, killing spree. My dad was deployed overseas. They had a big German shepherd who she had put outside for a little bit every night before going to sleep. And she said for a while she had to bring him in early because he'd just go crazy, barking, growling, and snarling every night. Shortly after he stopped doing that, there was a BTK murder not too far from the mobile home park. Scary stuff. Some older homes in Wichita have a second landline installed by the door because he was notorious for cutting phone lines. People would come home and check the line by the door, then the other line, just to reassure themselves. The Golden State Killer, known at the time as the East Area Unspeakable Act Offender, would often break into the homes of couples, making the women tie up the men. He'd stack dishes on the back of the man and threaten that if he heard the dishes fall, he'd kill everyone in the house and then he'd commit the unspeakable act on the woman and ransack the house for a few hours. At a community meeting about him, a macho man stood up and went on a rant about how a real man would never let such a thing happen to him or his wife. The Golden State Killer then proceeded to attack that man and his wife soon after, meaning he was attending that community meeting about himself. Whenever I read about the BTK killer waiting for one of his victims to come home and then getting frustrated and leaving due to her running late, it gives me chills. That woman cheated death. I find it interesting that apparently the BTK killer installed alarms at people's houses because of their fear of the BTK. Supply and demand, I guess. Dorangel Vargas killed and ate at least 10 people. He only ate men because he said their meat tasted better than women's. He also wouldn't eat fat people because he thought they contained too much cholesterol. In 2016, Vargas was involved in a prison riot in which he killed 2 other inmates and served their remains to other inmates. Frick me, this guy has no chill. How the frick could he kill and cook other inmates before someone realized? Flash frying. Journalist Vlado Tedeschi was caught when he reported on his own crimes and included information that hadn't been released to the public and only the killer could know. Of the 4 women who disappeared, 3 were found displaying signs of being viciously taken advantage of and tortured before having their air cut off with a phone cord. Though the police had initially revealed that the women had been throttled, they hadn't actually said with what. Noticing that Tedeschi had correctly named the specific type of phone cord used, they arrested him on suspicion of murder. After questioning him, they obtained a search warrant for his home. His house was filled with adult magazines and notes about the crimes. He had been carrying out his crimes and then writing about them in great detail for the paper, as if taunting the police. While police still have no suspect in these killings, it's likely that he's a really cool and handsome dude. We should all, go easy on him. He's smart too. Article by Vlado Tedeschi. I'm surprised we don't hear more about Robert Hansen in popular culture. He'd kidnap women and turn them loose in the Alaskan wilderness, where he'd hunt them down like animals. He didn't have the highest number of victims, but his method of hunting them for sport is absolutely insane.
Well, he's not the only one to have done it. I forget his name, but apparently a wealthy Mexican politician had the same MO.
He once spared a girl and returned her to the street because she refused to run.
Sadly, she wasn't believed and he killed several more before being arrested.
I'm guessing he wasn't being a nice guy, he just didn't get the excitement of the hunt, so he let her go. She was a dud. Mac Ray Edwards. He was a serial killer who worked for Caltrans. He'd kill his victims and then bury the bodies in places he'd later help build the highways over. Not all of his victims have been found, and many are still very likely under some of the California highways you may have driven over countless times. Albert Fish would stick needles into his pelvis when he was having fun with himself. Stick them so deep that sometimes they'd get stuck. He told this to the police, and they didn't believe him until they saw the X-ray. He had particular bedroom interests and particularly liked rough treatment. He also ate feces and drank urine. He called them peanut butter and cider, respectively. He once spent a few months trying to convince a single mother to watch his son. He told her to punish him when he acted up, and over the course of their correspondence, he told her to do nastier and nastier things until he dropped the act altogether and revealed he was asking her to do crap for him and on him. His letters to her are what got him arrested, as she was unnerved by what he was saying and took the letters to the police for indecency laws violations. I mean, most of these people want to be caught and recognized on some psychological level, don't they? It's horrifying in any case. How Jack the Ripper always cut the throats of his victims in a way that stopped the blood from getting on his clothes. I guess it was because he was the first notable serial killer in history, but I always thought he killed a lot of people. Then I found out he only killed 5. Yeah, but he was real messy about it. Blood and guts everywhere.
Except on his clothes.
In the 70s, there was a serial killer, Rodney Alcala, who was known for unspeakable acting and unaliving women. He went on a dating show and the women ended up choosing him, but luckily she cancelled the date just before. It's real creepy. Dennis Rader, aka BTK, started communicating with police after years of silence in around 2004. He'd gone decades without being caught, and once again he started sending taunting letters and items to them. He asked them if he could be traced if he sent his writings on a floppy disk, and they assured him through a communication in a newspaper that no, they couldn't trace him. He sent them a floppy disk and they found metadata linking to his church. He was arrested shortly thereafter. He was hurt that they'd lied to him because he thought that they'd developed a rapport. What's weird and I guess common is how well hidden that entire aspect of his life was. His family really had no clue. His wife found a poem that he'd written about one of the victims. When confronted, he lied and said it was for a writing assignment for a class he was taking, and he chose to write it about this woman because she was all over the news due to her murder. I think that was the closest a family member came to finding out. John Norman Collins used to pick up women on his motorcycle. The bodies of his victims used to be dumped here and there, but they were always washed. Turns out he only killed women who were on their time of the month. Also, he was referred to as John Norman Collins during his trial. He later changed his last name to Chapman, because there was a lawyer in town whose name was John Collins, and this was a way to distinguish between them. Brazilian serial killer Little Petey murdered over 40 people in prison. He began by murdering the gang leader that killed his girlfriend and then shanked his father, who was in prison for killing his own mother during a visit. Petey was well liked because he was considered a sort of vigilante avenger, despite killing indiscriminately within the prison walls. Apparently there was no difference between a substance user and a murderer in his eyes. Because of Brazil's odd sentencing laws, he could only serve a maximum of 30 years, and he became a YouTuber. He was in many ways a Brazilian celebrity. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Many years ago, I read the entire police report on the Green River Killer. I was fascinated by his attempts to cover his tracks by buying new car tires and destroying shoes, and getting new ones after murders. This was to avoid leaving traceable tracks. Also fascinating that he took the jewelry off of his victims and left it in the ladies' restroom at his workplace, and got off on seeing the found jewelry on various women around the office. Edmund Kemper, also known as the Co-Ed Killer, committed a series of brutal and horrific crimes in California before finally taking revenge on his mother for his troubled upbringing, at which point he drove to Arizona, called the police and confessed to everything, and waited for them to pick him up at the payphone. He provided intimate details of the case before he could get representation, so there was no way to get out of being found guilty for his crimes. In court, a lawyer asked him what he felt was a just punishment for what he'd done. He thought about it and replied, "Death in the most painful way, I guess." To this day, he declines to attend parole hearings and has repeatedly asserted that people like him don't belong in society. My grandfather was a social worker that managed Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield, when he was at Winnebago Mental Health Institute. He told us that Ed was one of the sweetest old men he'd ever talked to. Really nice guy. Liked to ask about how the workers' families were doing. It's not the strangest thing in this video, but for me, it's eerie how he could go from a sweet old man to a man who made furniture from human skin and body parts. Still weirds me out to this day. To be fair, Gein didn't kill a lot of people either. He was more obsessed with digging up bodies. He's actually the one I have sympathy for because it's clear as day that his mom messed him up beyond repair. She was a monster who destroyed the mental health of her child. Aside from the killing, BTK is such a self-serving, pompous piece of crap. He actually makes people fill out an application to write to him in prison. Guy gave an acceptance speech at his own sentencing. How narcissistic can you get? Not necessarily the killer himself, but the use of DNA and ancestry websites to identify the chameleon killer and the Golden State Killer is fascinating. In both cases, they uploaded the killer's DNA as a fake profile to find family matches. Then they traced the family history from there and narrowed down the suspects by location and date. Once they found a suspect, they test that person's DNA against the initial sample to confirm a match. Both cases have great podcasts where they go into detail about the process. Imagine trying to find cool genealogy stuff about your family and getting your Uncle Joe sent down for 13 murders and 50 unspeakable act offenses. Jeffrey Dahmer didn't eat people with tattoos because he said the ink made the flesh taste weird. Be safe, get inked, people. How did he know? I guess he ate one. Probably more than one if he was thorough in making sure the tattoos were the problem. That most serial killers have roughly average, often below average IQs, and their reputation as smart and difficult to catch is because of a couple of high-profile outliers and the fact that their victims are usually the sort of people who cops and society don't pay as much attention to. It's an uncomfortable fact that a murder with no witnesses and no obvious motive is by its own nature extremely difficult to solve. By targeting people you have no relation to with only intrinsic motive, your chances of being caught are already slim. It makes sense when you look at how many of these people are caught by their own hubris or outside factors like weird genealogy sites, rather than by forensic evidence. Scary stuff. The perpetrator, portrayed that one time by Zac Efron, worked at a mental health hotline center with author Anne Rule. Many victims did survive David Parker Ray, the toy box killer, but they didn't remember it, as he'd kidnap victims, use them for a few months, medicate them, and clean them thoroughly before dropping them off unconscious at the side of the road hundreds of miles away. Only some women picked up by him were killed, still more than enough to be classified as a serial killer. Jeffrey Dahmer was neglected by his parents in childhood and hadn't seen his mother for 10 years prior to incarceration. At sentencing, his father and stepmother asked for 10 minutes to say goodbye and hug. His father often visited him in prison and had weekly phone calls with his mother. Despite the heinous crimes, they seemed to have some kind of unconditional love. It makes all of the stories I hear about estrangement seem to have a different, strange perspective. I don't recall which one it was, but I remember hearing that there was a killer who'd only go into the home if the front door was unlocked, because otherwise he didn't feel welcome. Lock your doors, people. Issei Sagawa, a cannibal who was caught in France and pronounced insane. However, after going into a mental asylum in Japan, they declared him sane and he was checked out straight after. He's still free to this day if I remember correctly, and in interviews has stated that he may kill and eat human flesh again. While watching the interviews, I felt beyond unsettled. It really doesn't make me feel better that he's still out there. Mark Brandon Reed, aka Chopper, was a renowned killer in Australia. However, he only targeted substance dealers and people who made attempts on his life. When he got old, he was told he had liver cancer and had only a few weeks to live. He was asked by the television show 60 Minutes Australia if he wanted one last interview before he died. He accepted. When asked about all the murders, which he previously claimed as self-defense, not him, or he'd covered them up, he just straight up confessed to all of them, claiming they were never in self-defense and he'd committed the ones he previously denied. Then he passed away a few weeks later. He went out listing everyone he'd ended. It shocked everyone. I'd suggest looking him up. He's very interesting. In 1985, the Night Stalker was terrorizing LA. I was a young Marine out there, and a friend asked if me and another guy could come stay the night since her parents had to go out of town. I thought it was silly. He hadn't hit Orange County, but anything to get out of the barracks. That night, he hit just a few houses down in Mission Viejo. Some kid heard him and alerted his dad, who called the cops. That was the first lead they got. It's always bugged me that I didn't take it seriously at all, and it happened that close. I think we were pretty drunk that night. It was pretty sobering. In the Zodiac killer case, the number one suspect, one Arthur Lee Allen, had a lot of circumstantial evidence suggesting he was the guy. Enough for him to certainly be the Zodiac, but he was never apprehended due to the evidence coming out as negative. Circumstantial evidence was he lived in Vallejo near a couple of the murders, he took one sick day off work, a day after one of the suspected murders happened. His mother gave him a Zodiac watch for Christmas, which had the same symbol. He was incredibly smart and had knowledge about fingerprints and DNA and may have planted false evidence. He also spoke with his friend, Don Chady, before the Zodiac murders, about writing a novel about a man named Zodiac who kills couples at random with a firearm and a torch attached to it and taunt the police with letters. He told the police he was going to Lake Berryessa on the day one of the murders happened, but went to the coast instead. He also admitted to having bloody knives in his car on the day of that murder, which he claimed he killed a chicken with. The boot print left at one of the crime scenes had the same shoe size as Allen and was a Wing Walker military boot. Allen had been in the Navy before. He was supposedly able to write with his left and print with his right, in which the Zodiac letters are written in. A surviving victim picked his face out of a lineup in 1991, and the evidence gets weirder. He was arrested in 1974 for inappropriate conduct around children and released in 1977. There were no Zodiac letters sent during this period. He was a schoolteacher and was fired in 1968 because of more inappropriate behavior. In one of the letters, he threatened to unalive his pupils. He wanted to be a bouncer at his friend Ralph Spinelli's nightclub, but that guy wouldn't let him. He told him he'd go to San Francisco to kill a cabbie. That night, Paul Stein, a cab driver, was shot point-blank in the head. Multiple search warrants were made against Allen in the early 90s, and the search conducted found bombs and formulas for bombs which were identical to the ones found in the Zodiac letters. An unidentified man named Lee was known to associate with one of the victims, and Allen always went by his middle name. He died in August 1992, a month before he was meant to meet up with investigators about the case. There is some evidence against it being Allen as well. He was overweight, and a witness says Allen was not the man they saw on the night of the Paul Stein murder. Fingerprints didn't match, and a palm print found on a letter didn't match DNA and didn't match a stamp licked. Alan had a habit of getting other people to lick his stamps because the glue made him feel sick. Nobody was ever arrested during the Zodiac case. Despite its popularity as a pop culture meme or a TV reference, I didn't really know the backstory of this until now. Thanks for the write-up on one of the most prominent suspects. Glad this man is no longer among the living. The first serial killer on written record is from 5th century Yemen. Also, according to an FBI and private study in the US in 2018, they estimate anywhere between 150 to 2,000 active serial killers in the US. Edmund Kemper is just a really crazy dude. Apart from the fact that he was nearly 7 feet, the main thing that stuck out to me was that he was so smart, and that only 6 years after killing both his paternal grandparents and being diagnosed as criminally insane, he convinced psychiatrists he was rehabilitated, before he went on a violent killing spree and then turned himself in, totally of his own volition, as the police had no idea who he was. H. Holmes. He literally built a murder castle. The book The Devil in the White City is about him. Also, there's apparently a series in the works about it from Hulu. He confessed to 27 murders, though it could have been higher. Authorities say it may only have been 9. How this guy is rarely mentioned boggles my mind. He built just to be able to inflict pain and take lives. I ran across a story about Robert Berdella, the butcher of Kansas City, and I was familiar with the neighborhood where he lived. I used Google Maps to find his home, only to be shown a space between 2 other houses. When Berdella's trial was over, a local businessman bought the home and demolished it, reportedly so it wouldn't become a shrine to one of these people. What was the most genius criminal move that hoodwinked everyone? Guy found out that when a gas station lost its satellite connection, it automatically accepted all credit cards and would presumably process them later. So he climbed on the roof and covered the dish with foil to force it to lose connection, and then made charges on a card that was cancelled. An old coworker told me that for a while a Mexican chain, let's call it Aristotle, I guess that worked better written down than said out loud, nearby us had this weird thing where it wouldn't decline certain credit cards right away. By the time the message returned that it was declined, they'd already be out with their food. They used to use empty credit card gift cards to get food all the time. About 20-ish years ago, my dad used to own this company, and one of his employees died in a car accident. In the next few days, my dad received the work logs and books that this guy kept with him, and that's when he realized this guy was doing offline transactions, what they had to do when a client needed something after hours. I'm not exactly sure how it worked, it was something to do with the physical receipt layout, but he'd overcharge X amount for the item, get to work and input Y amount paid, and have the correct receipt and pocket the difference. He had been doing this for years, and my dad didn't even realize. He was never actually caught. My dad decided to not say anything to the family. Receipt doubling. Very common in restaurants that had paper orders too. I liked Anthony Curcio's story about an armored truck robber who covered his tracks by first placing a Craigslist ad to get a bunch of suspects to show up to an imaginary construction job near the scene of the crime dressed like him. Like yellow vest, safety goggles, blue shirt, respirator mask, and work boots. Curcio's undoing would come a month later when a homeless man reported to the police that several weeks before the robbery, he had seen a man drive up to the Bank of America parking lot and retrieve a disguise from behind a trash bin. The man found it suspicious enough to write down the license plate number of the car, which he later provided to the police. The car was registered to Curcio. What the man had seen was one of Curcio's practice runs to ensure proper timing of the heist. So in a way he got caught because of his diligence and attention to detail and the work he put in beforehand. Who'd have thunk it? I was an assistant manager at a little deli or corner store for a few years, and one of the employees bragged that he was getting a bag of green herb a week from the store for free. Not to me, but to other employees. I couldn't figure out how. The numbers always matched up. He was also really successful with one of our couponing programs. It took me a while to figure out that our POS system would take the coupon without the UPC being scanned. In other words, the coupons were essentially cash. He was cashing out $80 a week in coupons. I only found out when I was doing the inventory and books the same week. I saw that we sold a ton of ice cream and thought, geez, I'm going to have to restock the crap out of that. And then I realized that it was fully stocked and I put 2 and 2 together. My old boss was a major thief with 2 of his close friends in my small city. They all worked normal jobs at areas where they could talk to people, waiting tables and things like that. Every year on Christmas or another break like holiday, They'd case out a frat or sorority house while everyone was seeing their family and then clean them out. They'd go by storage units and look for things like cigarette butts around them and assume people probably practice playing music or store instruments there, since clearly they're there often enough to hang around and smoke. One of them got pinched when he tried to sell an expensive guitar at a music shop, and it was the shop owner's stolen guitar. Thinking quickly, he said he bought the guitar from a guy named Steve. Gave the cops all of the info since he'd been working with Steve at the restaurant waiting tables. Well, Steve actually just died about a week before in a car wreck, so no charges on anyone. They had ATVs, motorcycles, every video game console, TVs, instruments, the lot. When they were finally busted selling a four-wheeler to a sheriff's daughter, the other detective who investigated Steve told them it was a pretty clever idea sending them after a dead man. Then they all went to prison for about 4 years. In the 2000s, you could order a new credit card, not activate it, and then when you were on a long-haul flight, you could upgrade via the card machine to first class once on board, and then pay for the premium service. When the flight landed and got internet connection, none of the purchases would be successful and you'd already be out of the airport. I never understood how they couldn't find you afterwards with your passport and credit card details, but it was a big fraudulent scam that hit the newspapers multiple times. Maybe it was because apart from witness testimonies, there wasn't a sufficient paper trail to say that you had upgraded or had any of the expensive champagne or duty-free. I guess it could be that this was happening before September 11th, when all you needed to fly was a paid ticket and no ID necessary. So the person using the unactivated card could have been nobody at all. Old, long time ago friend of mine used to be in a professional car thief group. They'd steal 70s and 80s model cars and trucks, strip them down, repaint and redecorate them, then sell them. The state next to theirs had this weird thing where if a car was wrecked, it went to the junkyard, but the title was never marked as totaled or destroyed. It had been changed. So they'd buy these wrecks for next to nothing, get a clean title, swap the VIN, scrap the wreck at a metal yard, and sell the newly VIN'd car at a normal price to regular people. When asked what made him quit, he laughed and said, "The local district attorney." Turns out the DA was looking for a Camaro for his wife, and my buddy had a minty fresh one with low miles for sale. The DA, along with his sheriff buddy, knocked on my friend's door to take it for a test ride, at which point my friend panicked. Not only was the Camaro hot, the other car in his garage 3 feet away was mid-rebuild and the truck out front had just been picked up. He was sure he was screwed, but they took the car for a spin, loved it, and paid cash. My friend had a come-to-Jesus moment. He saw the error of his ways, took everything automotive at his house to the scrapyard, and bought a legit car. All that very day. Oh god. There just seem to be 2 paths with this that I can think of. One is the DA going to the sheriff and convincing him to come along to buy a car because he doesn't want to get scammed or overcharged by a single penny, and hey, maybe we could even get a discount. Or the second one being the DA and sheriff knowing they've got no proper evidence and just going to absolutely mess with the dude, having zero provable evidence the car was hot but getting a great discount on it and ignoring the crimes temporarily. A very clever criminal was stealing electricity for his nightclub in Liverpool. The power company knew something was happening because as soon as this guy took over, their usage was about a quarter of the previous owners. They finally sent an old guy out to check the meter for problems. He discovered that they'd fitted a pressure switch on the door so that when it was opened, the meter was turned as normal, but as soon as you closed it, the meter would stop turning. 2 years they'd been investigating before he was caught. This one guy hit like 10 banks and many other stores, just wearing his pandemic mask and a hood, always on a very rainy and stormy day. Walked into each place and handed them a note and said that he'd shoot and be certain to kill them if they didn't give him all the cash they had. Ballsy, but they still haven't caught him. Probably didn't even have a weapon. What's funny is none of the banks even triggered the silent alarm, and most of the stores called like 5 minutes after he left. He must have been pretty intimidating. Another fact, he never had a vehicle, according to the security cameras. My theory is he had an accomplice somewhere nearby pick him up, though there could be other ways. I'd be interested in theories on how he always got away so clean. Honestly, my only theory is that the employees had lost what little love of the job they had when they were forced to serve non-quarantine compliant customers at their place and were in no way willing to risk catching a bullet until they were sure this guy was gone. I'll tell on myself if you guys want a, wow, that person kinda sucks kind of story. When I was younger, we're talking 16 to 21, I worked at an Italian restaurant that paid me cash and kept out a portion for taxes. Blah. Anyway, I worked there for 5 years, and around year 2, when I totaled the amount of money they kept that I should have been paid, I felt cheated, even though I was supposed to pay taxes as well. I had a vague idea of what taxes were, but not a great understanding. I knew enough to know that they didn't pay taxes on their business, though, and being immigrants, they had a grant allowing them to not pay taxes the first 2 years they were open. I basically was mad that they were scamming me, even though I was also scamming the government. I was young and just didn't know it was as big a deal as it was, and in my mind, I felt like if anyone deserved to keep the money, it was me, not them. I was basically unemployed for 5 years because I was never on their books. Anyway, I started getting mad because there were only 3 servers including me, and I did a lot around the store. Ordering beer and food, writing the checks for the linens and other supplies, and working 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. the 5 days that I worked. I was severely underpaid. We used handwritten tickets and no point-of-service system, so I started completely pocketing certain cash-paid items. When I rang out the cash people, I'd put it to the side and pocket it after they left, and throw away both receipts. The kitchen's copy, and mine. Also, when people paid by card, I'd have to manually enter the total amount paid, including the tip at the end of the night, and then enter the amount paid for just the meal, so they knew what the tip was. On bigger checks, I'd change the total for the food and drink by a few bucks under the actual cost, so I got a bigger tip. The owners were so negligent with their business that they never knew. I'd like to say that I never once stole from an innocent person or patron, just the people who were scamming me. Looking back, I can't believe how much authority I had, and how much they believed in me to not do the things that they were doing. I was so brazen and unafraid because I felt indignant towards them. Even on the day I rage quit, I wrote up a to-go ticket for a huge order, like 3 extra-large pizzas, several of my favorite dishes, and desserts, and when the owner went upstairs for his daily nap with a woman who wasn't his wife, I loaded up my car with cases of wine and all the food I'd made for the make-believe to-go order. I didn't have to buy groceries for days. Even though they're scam artists in their own right, I do feel pretty bad about what I did, and I'd never do that again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Okay, I worked in a corporate hair salon. We had a class on loss prevention at one time, and the lady that came to talk about what constitutes theft with employees. One story she told us was about another salon, located elsewhere, where the stylists themselves were stealing money right from the company. Out of 5 stylists, 4 of them were scamming the company. Instead of running credit card payments through the corporate credit card system on the POS, they'd tell the clients the CC system was down, and they'd have to run the card through another CC system. Each of the 4 stylists had Square devices that they each set up like their own business, so the charges went straight to their own bank accounts, and then the service would either be cancelled or show up as a no-show. They finally got caught when a customer called corporate to complain about her service and was wanting a refund. The transaction was nowhere to be found. The sad thing was, one of the stylists was a salon manager who ended up going to prison for 3 years plus having to pay restitution. I'm not sure what the other 3 got, but I'm sure they all lost their jobs. It just blows the mind things people will come up with. I worked with a guy who did this and got fired because of it. He made his Square business name sound like it was a division of the company we worked for, and he'd add extra services to invoices, pay himself for the extras, and then void them from the system before it got to accounting. When they found out what he was doing, they investigated everyone, and pretty much the entire management team was committing theft and fraud left and right, and corporate just shut the place down and fired everyone whether they were involved or not, and restaffed from another site over the next week. My friend who worked at Best Buy used to do a pretty clever scheme. It's kind of messed up, but we were in college and our moral code wasn't exactly honorable at the time. Usually during the holidays, there is a deal where if you buy a certain TV, you get a gift card, something like 10 to 20 bucks. This wasn't really heavily advertised, but a salesman would likely tell this to a customer to get them to buy a TV. Well, my friend wouldn't tell the customer. He'd just sell the TV and pocket the gift card. However, he knew that each gift card was scanned and tied to that customer's transaction, and him since he sold the TV. So what he'd do was wait until he had a few cards, then get into a co-worker's computer session and buy one large gift card using the smaller gift cards. Now he could use the larger card for whatever purchases he wanted without it really being tracked back to him. He never got caught, and I was always impressed that he could pull this off. I just like to tell this story when I can. My dad used to race cars in the 80s, and he got caught by a police car. They turned on their lights and they chased him. My dad was using NOS before that was super common, and he flipped that on and took off, and then skidded into a random parking lot, crawled through the bushes and got home. Then he immediately called the police and filed that his car was stolen. They already knew my dad, but they were like, "God damn it, we'll keep an eye out for it." "Oh, look, there it is." My dad was all like, "Oh, thank God you found it," and he walked over and picked it up and drove home with it. They knew he was lying, but couldn't do anything about it. Probably had to lay low for a while after that one, I reckon. There's no way you could even risk being caught doing something tangentially illegal. No jaywalking, nothing. My father ran film developing businesses and photography studios back in the 80s and 90s. That industry didn't age well into the 21st century. He hired a young employee who was a brilliant salesman, and the business grew. School pictures and wedding bookings soared, as did military events and running the color lab for several local newspapers. This guy could sell anything, but was a horrible photographer and couldn't run a lab, so he stayed in the sales end of the business. He offered to have his tax guy do the business taxes at a steep discount, so they changed tax preparers. Immediately after the quarterly employment and business taxes went off, this guy flipped. He refused to sell, yelled at customers, didn't answer the phone, and opened film canisters. He spoiled 2 weddings from the previous weekend, which had to be restaged and reshot. Have you got any idea how much it costs to restage an entire wedding? Imagine buying 2 complete weddings, paying to rent all new tuxes, renting the same space, and pretending to do the wedding all over to get photographs, including buying airfare for family across the country. We fired the guy and were immediately sued. He paid his accountants on the back end to refile taxes as a partnership, not a sole proprietorship, and then took claim to half the assets of the business. He walked out with $250,000 in photographic equipment and color lab machines, sold his assets for cash, and disappeared. We found out much later that the same man, his accountant, and his attorney pulled the same scam with a car stereo company, a construction company, a muffler shop, and a taco franchise over the next 10 years. Very methodical and long-game scam. You get in, get your accountant to get the business, file as a partnership without them knowing, get fired, and sue. He did that again and again, moving cities but keeping his attorney and accountant paid on the back end. It seems extremely easy to prove that it's a scam in court, right? You'd think so, but this was 1986 where records were on paper. From the judge's perspective, you have old articles of incorporation as a sole proprietorship from 5 years prior, but also very recent records of tax filings as a partnership. To a court, the whole thing looks like a messy breakup between business partners, not an owner firing an employee. Believe it or not, this scam wasn't terribly uncommon. I saw this story of a black guy wearing a blonde wig with a white person Halloween-type mask over his face with sunglasses, so the cops thought they were looking for a white guy when it was really a black guy. A few years back, my elderly neighbor's home was robbed. Her husband had just passed away, and the obituary was in the paper with showing times and the time the burial ceremony was to start. These lowlifes looked up her husband's address in the phone book and knew exactly what time their house would be unoccupied. They took absolutely everything of value from the lady on the day she was putting her husband in the ground, and they never caught them. My dad is an attorney and had 2 clients, one who had an old, huge Chevy Nova with a very well-hidden switch under the desk. He'd flip the switch to turn the brake lights off and then go in front of someone and hit the brakes. He won several claims from insurance companies. The second one was flying into a small international airport carrying normal checked bags. Flew in from Canada every time, small pedal jumpers. Turns out what he was actually doing was smuggling immense amounts of white snow. He refused to say a word to the cops or in his own trial, just pled out and went to jail. My dad gets a single check to pay for his service of sitting and doing the plea deal, about half of his normal yearly earnings. Turns out the guy was smuggling for Pablo Escobar, and would have been killed if he talked. I mean, these are all great stories, but I like to think about the fact that the smartest criminals aren't ever caught. I wonder what type of stuff is happening out there that we don't even know about. A bank in my hometown was robbed by a group of individuals during a historic snowstorm. We got 12 feet in 2 days, and early in the storm, the bank was still open. A couple of people just walked in, masked with weapons, robbed the place, and escaped on foot. Police response time was about 45 minutes at best, and by the time they arrived on scene, the tracks were gone. Long shot, but pure genius. Not my story, but my dad's, and I don't remember all the details. This happened maybe 3 decades ago. My dad worked bank robberies and other financial fraud cases. There was a group of guys who got involved in some kind of payroll scheme that managed to successfully and anonymously embezzle a lot of cash. Like I said, I don't remember all the details, but it involved skimming a few cents off of each paycheck from tens of thousands of checks at a time on each payday for some big company or companies. This was only possible because it was before the age when everything was digital as a given, and they got access to the physical payrolls, modified them, and then paid themselves out of the difference somehow, so that everything still added up to the books, and nobody was likely to notice the 1 or 2 cents missing from their own check. These guys had code names inspired by their D&D group, like Wizard or Troll, etc. Well, some years after my dad caught these guys, he was called in for an interview for another embezzlement case of some kind. They're doing the good cop, bad cop routine, and my dad was supposed to play the bad cop. But the guy looked familiar and kept glancing at my dad nervously, like he thought he was familiar too. So he stayed quiet until a few minutes later it clicked and he said, "Hey, wait a minute. I know you. You're the troll." The other agent in the room at that point just sat back while my dad, who was supposed to be the bad cop, just started shooting the breeze with this guy, buttering him up, reminiscing about what a good case that was and how good a job this guy and his friends did before they were caught, got the information they needed, and closed another case. God damn it, guys! You were giving people another reason to hate D&D players in a time where the satanic panic was already a thing. Kind of a great switcheroo for your bad cop dad though, and good improv from the other guy. A friend of mine did some time as a Marine officer a couple of years ago. He got a call once about a suspected drunk boat driver, which here in Canada is treated the same as a DUI in a car. The difference is when the boat is docked, it's considered a house, not a motor vehicle. Therefore, you can drink on board while docked. He pulled up to the dock that the guy was at and found the guy with his boat tied up and a beer in both hands. And since the only other evidence was a witness who heard the guy on the mariner's radio, they didn't have enough to arrest him. By the way, a single DUI in Canada is punishable for up to 10 years on a first offense. For non-citizens, having a DUI from anywhere makes you permanently inadmissible to Canada. We take that crap seriously. My license plates were swapped with a car of the same make and model that was stolen. They then used their stolen car with my plates on them in a police chase. It nearly got my husband arrested for this crime until I showed them my car at the train station with the stolen car's plates on them. Cops were surprised that they were that clever. Still got caught in the end, though. Cop, but a guy bought a truck and needed plates, but was on the run and couldn't get things legally. Drove around until he saw a truck just like his and wrote down the plate. Stole multiple plates with similar numbers and letters. Combined them into one plate using tin snips, Gorilla Glue, and patience. Drove around with a clean plate for months before anyone noticed. Couldn't even tell what he did unless you were inches away from it. What movie was basically just product placement to brainwash you? They say recruiting for the US Navy and US Air Force went up a lot after Top Gun came out in '86. The Navy even put up recruiting booths at theaters that were showing it. The frickin' emoji movie. Like seriously, they show you multiple mobile games, how to play those games, and also show them to be fun. Yeah, right. Little to no plot, just ads. The emoji movie was only ever made to make emoji merchandise. With that in mind, the movie was beyond successful. The Wizard. The Internship. It's basically a big ad for Google. Evolution. The big gag is the movie is a product placement for Head & Shoulders shampoo. Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. Still kind of a fun movie though. Mac and Me. While Coca-Cola is everywhere and even literally saves the aliens from death, it's the McDonald's facts that are more interesting. Supposedly, they're the ones who bankrolled a lot of the film's production. It's one of the only films to legally use Ronald McDonald. They're very hardcore about how they let the media use him, but they were basically the producers of the movie and forced the McDonald's scene. Not a movie, but the scene from Hawaii 5-0 where the guy eats Subway is probably the most on-the-nose product placement I've ever seen. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's all just constantly in your face. Windows Surface, Windows products, every car in the show is a Chevy. I'm astonished that they weren't flying in Chevy-branded helicopters. SE, and I can't believe I have to leave a gap here for prudish YouTube, X-Tape, starring Cameron Diaz and Jason Segel. The entire thing was a gigantic ad for Apple and they weren't even subtle about it. There's literally a scene where Jason Segel throws an iPad out the window and then goes to get it from outside and says, "Man, the construction of these things is unbelievable." There are whole montages of all the Apple promotions in the film on YouTube. Spaceballs was just advertising itself the entire time. I'm still patiently waiting on the release of Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money. In 2013, Rick Moranis stated that a few years after the film's release, he and Mel Brooks discussed a sequel titled Spaceballs 3, The Search for Spaceballs 2. The most recent I watched was the new Sonic movie. Like, they even quoted the Olive Garden motto verbatim. It was really jarring. I tell myself it was to pay for the extra VFX to fix Sonic. Good point. That can't have been cheap, although there are still numerous conspiracies about whether that notorious first trailer and the subsequent fix was actually just an act of marketing genius. I still don't know. Remember that 2004 Will Smith movie, I, Robot? There was a scene in the film where he conspicuously opens a vintage pair of Converse shoes. Then later, his mum asks him what he's wearing, and he lifts his foot up and says something like, "Converse All-Stars, vintage 2004. I know you want them." It's a literal commercial in the middle of the gosh darn film. Wayne's World did in-movie ads better than anybody, ever. If you know the scene, you know. The new Space Jam. It was just Warner Brothers saying, "Don't forget we own all these franchises, so suck it, Disney." Every single Transformers movie or TV show. There's one where the guy just stops mid-car chase to chug a Bud Light. Yeah, right. During the end battle of the first Transformers movie, a bunch of everyday objects were turned into Decepticons, one of which was just an Xbox 360 complete with the startup chime and everything. Also, those original cartoons are literally just ads for toys. Jurassic World. How many times were they going to show us that Mercedes-Benz logo or whatever car they featured? Usually in shows too, it'll be a Chevy Silverado or a Chevy brand car. I vividly remember Heroes being way overstuffed with Nissans. I specifically remember the cheerleader asking to borrow the car, but calling it by proper branding name. Instead of, "Can I just borrow the car?" it was, "Hey Dad, can I borrow the Nissan whatever exact model it was?" I've actually forgotten what specific car they were selling themselves out for money. I just remember it being a super jarring line. I was half expecting her to turn straight to camera and say something like, "I need to borrow that car specifically for its comfortable seats, turbocharged engine, and smooth handling." Jack and Jill. It's weird that the whole movie frames the sheer absurdity of Al Pacino shilling out for Dunkin' Donuts, but it still actually is a real ad for a real product that Dunkin's is really paying the movie to advertise. It's like they had a celebrity endorsement commercial idea that was so stupid, they felt the need to make an entire movie letting the audience know they knew it was stupid. With that in mind, Adam Sandler movies. He gets sponsored by something like Subway, and it is all you see. The Lego Movie. Fantastic ad, though. Not gonna lie, I bought some more afterwards. Look, all of the Transformers are bad, but Age of Extinction might top them all. There's a really blatant Beats ad, but the worst is one scene which is basically a 1-minute long scene filled with Bud Light. Wreck-It Ralph 2. The cameos in Ralph 1 were really tasteful. Cute little references. Ralph 2 was just, haunting. Any driving scene in Marvel. And actually most action driving scenes. First product placement I can recall identifying as such was the Mercedes being used to keep the protagonists from plunging off a cliff in Jurassic Park Lost World. All I remember about Demolition Man was Taco Bell won the fast food wars because of their healthy menu. Talladega Nights. They play an entire Applebee's commercial right at the climax of the movie, and it's absolutely hilarious. "I'm Ricky Bobby, and if you don't chew Big Red, then F you." But that in itself is half the joke, the other half being how commercialized NASCAR was at the time. In 2005 and 6, when that movie was being made and released, you couldn't turn on the TV, radio, open a newspaper without some sort of company, driver, or team hawking a product or service. It's an older movie, but 1, 2, 3 is just a long ad for Coca-Cola. Wasn't The Italian Job just an ad for the new Mini Cooper? It was also a remake of a 1969 film that prominently featured the Mini Cooper as part of the heist. So, a commercial remaking a commercial. Not a movie, but I always found it strange how The Walking Dead constantly features newer and newer cars each year during a zombie outbreak, where I just can't imagine many new cars would be being made. It takes you right out of the apocalypse setting into some crappy Chevy commercial we've all seen 1,000 times. Good thing the show missed all of its opportunities to be any good, so it didn't matter much. The Devil Inside. It ends with the black screen saying to go to a website to find out more information, making the movie feel like an ad for the site. One of 2 movies I've been to that was actively booed in theater. Idiocracy was an obvious advertisement for Braundo brand beverages. Not a movie, but Hawaii 5-0 is basically one endless Chevy commercial. Ralph Breaks the Internet. The whole movie is just an ad for big social media companies, with some nods to other companies. They even advertised themselves by putting the Disney princesses in. Copper Mountain. This piece of garbage right here. This is hands down the worst thing I've ever seen. I thought young Jim Carrey and Alan Thicke, labeled a comedy, it'll probably have some laughs. The answer is no, it really frickin' doesn't. It's a 1-hour Club Med ad with crappy country music band performances and a sprinkle of Carrey and Thicke hijinks that just don't hit the mark. My friends and I had movie nights back in the day where we'd rate each other's movie picks. This was the first to earn a 0 out of 10. Please don't watch this to verify my claims, it's not worth it. There are an awful lot of movies that are advertisements of one kind or another for the US Armed Forces. Transformers is a repeat offender for this sort of ad, as well as all the other crap it does. Idiocracy was not only an obvious ad for Braundo brand beverages, it was also for Carl Jr.'s and Fuddruckers as well. President Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Camacho. Click was basically an ad for Bed Bath & Beyond. Castaway was basically an ad for FedEx or Wilson's Sport Equipment. Little Nicky. Popeye's chicken is frickin' awesome. Alright, I'm including the movies whose placement has a certain eye-rolling quality because otherwise this video would be 50% of the same movies on repeat. We've already got a couple coming up over and over. You folks don't want to know how many answers I'm having to just scroll through to get any original answers at all at this point. As an example of one I've scrolled through a bunch of times already, The Emoji Movie, I Wanted to Burn My TV. The Thunderbirds Movie. Lady Penelope's iconic Fab One car was changed from a Rolls-Royce, as it is in the original shows, to a Ford car, proudly displaying the Ford logo front and center. Every single car in the movie was a Ford car, including several of a model that at the time hadn't come out yet, and there are scenes of news reports that say "sponsored by Ford" in the corner. Gee, I wonder which motoring company helped finance the movie. Don't get me wrong, I still kinda like the movie despite how bad it is, but oof. I heard the new Space Jam movie is basically just one big ad. Also, there's pretty much a fully fledged Chevy Camaro commercial in one of the Transformers movies. Josie and the Pussycats came out in April 2001 and flopped as hard as anything had in a long time. It didn't even make back half of its budget. Zoolander came out in September 2001 and was a very solid hit. Made double its budget, created more than a couple of memes that still persist today, and even got a sequel. The weird thing is, they're basically the same movie. One is based on the music industry, and the other is the fashion industry, but other than that, they have the same basic underlying plot concept and a really dumb but enjoyable sense of humor. If you like Zoolander and haven't seen Josie, give it a shot. You might be pleasantly surprised. The early 2000s was a time where corporate cynicism caught up to Gen X irony, and honestly, Josie and the Pussycats handles that smarter than it had any right to. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's secretly a brilliant film everyone should analyze, but much like James Gunn's Scooby-Doo movie, the product is steeped in enough sarcasm to drown a Brit. World War Z was a giant Pepsi ad. Brad Pitt drinking the Pepsi against red and blue lighting at the dramatic climax of the movie gets me every time. Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. Well, it speaks for itself. I'm going to show my age here, but The Wizard, which I believe was produced by Nintendo. Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle was an ad for White Castle. Likewise, Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay was an ad for Guantanamo Bay. Look, I'm going to tell you about another real doozy of a movie, but first I want to give thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for entertaining me while I write this comment. In Raid Shadow Legends, you get to choose between heroes or something and battle things, maybe. Anyway, you should buy it. Right, what was I saying? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Ready Player One. Spielberg couldn't license all of the properties from the book and maybe never intended to. Instead, he turned it into an ad for his back catalogue. Top Gun was basically a 90-minute recruitment video. Transporter 2. Lord of the Rings was clearly just an ad to improve the sales of the books. Well, whether or not they intended it to, it also blew up the New Zealand tourism industry. Back to the Future Part 2. The Do-Over with Adam Sandler, Corona Beer. Independence Day is the kind of propaganda that Starship Troopers satirizes. Fast and the Furious and all of its parts. That movie was all about cars and family. You've Got Mail. Maybe it speaks to how ubiquitous AOL was at the time that I didn't notice then, but it's legitimately difficult to watch now. When it came out, basically AOL was the internet, but it's pretty cringy that the two biggest rom-com actors of that time were in just a 2-hour commercial. That movie also had a very basic 3D rendering of New York City that flew through at the beginning of the movie and is considered super state-of-the-art back then, if that gives you any insight into the era that the movie was released in. Pom Wonderful presents The Greatest Movie Ever Sold. It's a mockumentary by Morgan Spurlock of Super Size Me fame that's literally just him going from company to company and getting them to sponsor the movie. That's the whole movie. As a bonus, he convinced my town to name itself after the movie as a promotional stunt. At least we got one new cop car out of it, or was it Substance Dogs? I don't remember. Adam Sandler at this point is just an ad man. Every movie has him pitching something. Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. This documentary was just an ad for the maker's diet plan and books. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is an ad for eHarmony. Up in the Air with George Clooney. Twister. I rewatched it for the first time in probably a decade the other day, and I realized it's basically just a big Jeep ad. Jeep or Dodge or whatever, it was a car ad anyway, and a slight Pepsi ad as well. The Game of Thrones Season 8 episode with the Starbucks coffee in it. Like such an aggressive marketing move. Starbucks must have been frickin' thrilled about that. Or they just paid off the actor, can't remember who, to accidentally leave it in there, because that would have been really clever with all the commotion it created. Are you saying that Emilia Clarke did it on purpose and went laughing all the way to the bank? Because that theory is more entertaining than anything that happened that season. What? Come after me. Lots of product placement in Fight Club. Doesn't take away the fact that it's a brilliant film, mind you. The Mighty Ducks. Angels in the Outfield qualifies as well because I believe the Angels were owned by Disney at the time? Spaceballs was basically just an excuse to plug Yogurt's merchandise. Krispy Kreme presents the Power Rangers movie. Evolution. Have you seen the end? That was actually fairly sound science. The writing was pretty clever. You've got the fat guy who's vain about his hair. He happens to know that the active ingredient in Head & Shoulders was selenium. Shampoo being the thing that kills the aliens is funny. They crammed several jokes on several levels into that. Maybe not a real ad, but wasn't The Truman Show a satire on those kinds of movies in a way? There were constantly ads or product placement throughout from the real world in his fake one. One scene that comes to mind is when he's questioning his wife, and to avoid going further into the topic, she does an ad for a cocoa drink. And celebrities. And Truman Show Cocoa, a cinematic masterpiece, all captured that moment and its satirical edge. Not exactly what you asked here, but Crossroads. Basically a movie to promote Britney Spears' music career. Jack to the Future. Sorry. Ralph Breaks the Internet. Wreck-It Ralph 2. Luca. That Disney movie is just a colorful Vespa ad. Food Fight. Avatar was just an ad for 3D TVs. The new Space Jam. Terrible, terrible movie all about LeBron. What a waste of time. Limitless is basically a 2-hour ad for Adderall. The Wizard was basically a long Nintendo commercial. Fast and Furious. Although maybe if it wasn't, then it would be pointless. It's kind of hard to make a case for a movie that consists of destroying a ton of cars without actually being sponsored by one. However, the Corona was pushed hard. American Sniper was just US war propaganda. It was right-wing, conservative, Christian, circle-cranking pornography. They tried to make it seem like he was conflicted about killing people, but if you ever heard the guy talk in real life, he frickin' loved it. Not a movie, but Sons of Anarchy went hard on Harleys. Pretty obvious, I guess, since it's an American motorcycle club and it's pretty genuine to clubs like that, so it sort of gets a pass. But then they doubled down and went even harder for Miller Lite. I'm pretty sure in one episode they even said, "It's Miller time." Lego The Adventures of Cliché Powers. And Lego Elves Secrets of Elvendale is, in my opinion, even worse. Like the other shows are Lego characters doing Lego things. I won't defend them, but they're all using the same basic setup as most children's shows since the 80s. I tried Elvendale because I enjoy action-adventure shows aimed towards girls, but I couldn't get over the jarring, realistic people with vaguely Lego-themed powers living in a vaguely Lego-themed world. I quit watching after about 5 minutes. I had an entire module in my European university devoted to militainment. Essentially, the armed forces sponsor, provide resources, or pay for movies or video games that show the military in a good light. Think Call of Duty, Black Hawk Down. Many of those extras were actual soldiers. Most of that equipment was provided for free, and the goal is to glamorize the military. In hindsight, Idiocracy was just an ad for the post-2020s. My Big Fat Greek Wedding was just an ad for Windex. Still an amazing movie, though. Not basically just an ad, but I'd have to say James Bond. Some watches and cars owe a lot to this franchise. Smirnoff would probably like in on that. Ford vs. Ferrari was a movie-length Ford commercial. God's Not Dead. That movie was pretty awful, but I remember I literally rolled my eyes when the Duck Dynasty dude told everyone to text their friends, "God's not dead." I saw it with a church group that bought out the entire screening and they all applauded at the end of the movie. I think that was the day I realized people in my religion don't care about art so long as it says crap they agree with. War Incorporated. Back to the Future and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But who said that that makes them a bad film? They're just promotional advertising. The Blind Side. It's a giant billboard for Under Armour. Next time you watch it, that logo will be all you see. Pretty much any Adam Sandler movie. Popeye's Chicken, Gatorade, Bed Bath & Beyond, there always seems to be something in his films that's just blatant product placement. Pokémon Anything. The TV show Undercover Boss. It's basically a PR show to say that the bosses aren't really the bad guys. Just look at what they do for their employees. The Founder. I don't even like McDonald's, but it did make me want to order something seeing their logo and stuff everywhere. I feel like the pod racing in Phantom Menace was done for the sole purpose of selling Nintendo 64 pod racing games. Black Widow is 100% an ad for an upcoming Disney Plus series. Well, this 4-year-old comment aged well. I don't know that Yelena's appearance in Hawkeye 2 counts. That felt more like a cameo. We've eventually got the Thunderbolts and New Avengers movie, but that really feels like them making lemonade with lemons. Pretty good lemonade, admittedly. The Terminal. Battle Los Angeles was a 90-minute advertisement for the US Marine Corps. Never seen so much blatant pandering. I'm surprised I haven't seen Cars 2 mentioned yet. Not entirely an ad, but I seriously always remember the Coca-Cola and Reebok not an ad scene in Wayne's World. Transformers is one big General Motors commercial. Like every Marvel movie for every other Marvel movie. Idiocracy because we've seemingly bought into most of it. Basically every US action is sponsored by the military, so there's that. Space Jam 2. Zero Dark 30, aka imagine if our campaign of illegal treatment of prisoners had produced useful intelligence. The Hangover. Can't wait to go to Vegas, baby. Castaway. My dad calls it the FedEx ad with Tom Hanks. Specifically Iron Man. It was a long shot with a then washed-up actor done on a minimum budget to try and push toy sales, and it ended up launching the whole film franchise when it made $500 million in the box office. Huh. You've Got Mail. I'm looking at you, AOL, wherever the hell you are. The Island, 2005. Ad placement after ad placement. It becomes overt once they leave the island and enter the real world. And so many Michael Bay movies that others have already listed. Evolution. Mac and Me was basically an ad for Pepsi. Stronger, with Jake Gyllenhaal, was basically a corporate pitch for how great Costco is as an employer. Effective. The Emoji Movie. Has anyone said click yet? Bed Bath & Beyond ad. Spaceballs, the movie. I got the Spaceballs PJs and I'm thinking about getting the Spaceballs the Flamethrower. Not technically a movie, but the South Park Black Friday trilogy was essentially a giant ad for the South Park video game. The Sandlot. Still to this day, I contemplate buying a pair of PF flyers. Due to product placement, the Emoji Movie was profitable prior to release. iRobot. It felt like an advertisement for a shoe company. I can't remember if it was Skechers or Converse. A Recipe for Seduction, a Lifetime and KFC mini-movie starring Mario Lopez as Colonel Harland Sanders. Ready Player One. Men in Black, one big advertisement for Ford, Doc Martens, Oakley, and New York tourism. Nomadland. I know, not really, but Amazon sure does come out looking good. Sonic the Hedgehog has multiple ones, namely for Zillow and Olive Garden. It's so weirdly out of place in a movie like that. Demolition Man. Gotta go get me some Taco Bell. The new War of the Worlds movie with Ice Cube. Not only is it hilariously bad, it's also got some of the most on-the-nose Amazon eggplant sucking I've ever seen. Batman vs Superman felt like an ad for a Jeep. James Bond and Aston Martin. The Mummy with Tom Cruise. Josie and the Pussycats, but that's the point of the plot. Huh. Not a movie, but Burn Notice has constant product placements, especially with cars and beverages. Dope show though. When did a bad guest in your house deserve the red wedding treatment? Happened to a friend. When we were younger, this kid came over to his house and took a crap and didn't flush or use toilet paper. Then a few weeks later, when my friend went over to his house, he was going to return the favor, but lo and behold, there was already a turd waiting for him there. Friend living in Europe came to the US to visit family. Her husband was here for a couple of weeks but went back to Europe for work while she stayed with us for the summer. Unbeknownst to us, she had stopped taking her medications and started racking up long-distance phone calls to Europe in the middle of the night and early in the morning to talk to her husband. But if she called his office and he wasn't there, she'd just ask to be put on hold until he returned to the office. I received a $3,000 phone bill and realized what had happened. Thankfully, our phone company at the time listened to my story and agreed not only to set us up with an international plan to call Europe cheaply, but they made it retroactive to when she started staying with us. $3,000 became less than $200. This was at my grandmother's funeral. She was a well-known lady, so many people came to her funeral. What happened while we were all grieving was a bunch of people decided to steal a whole bunch of random crap from our home. All our plates, cups, cooking utensils, bags of rice and medicine, all gone. After my mum passed away, her elderly friend came to visit. She asked for wine, she pounded back 4 glasses, then she whipped out a handful of sleeping pills and downed those too. I freaked out. She said she did it all the time. She then proceeded to fall off the chair. She tried going upstairs and started to fall. I caught her and half carried her to bed. I heard her fall hard on the floor. She was laughing and delirious, and was 74 years old by the way. I wanted to call an ambulance, but she flat out refused. I put her back into bed, rinse and repeat 3 times. The next morning I asked if she had other friends she could stay with, and I drove her to them. When I was in high school, I was having a party at my parents' house when they were out of town. My buddy Derek wasn't feeling well and really needed to take a dump. Apparently, all of the bathrooms were occupied at the time of the emergency, so he ran into the garage, pulled his pants down, and diarrheaed all over the garage floor. I was at a party, and I heard the host yell, "Oh my god, who threw up on my dog?" The dog was a shepherd mix, a bit stout, so he was walking around with a puddle of chuck-up on his back like it was a saddle. No, and if he's like any of the other good boys and girls I know, he was probably just walking around looking perfectly happy about it until he was summoned for washing time. We don't deserve doggos. We have a backup key hidden somewhere outside the house. Once my sister locked herself out while with some friends, so she got the backup key and now her friends knew where that key was hidden. Flash forward some time and we're coming home after going on vacation and we find our house has been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but all of the furniture was flipped upside down. Turns out my sister's friends did it as a prank. In retrospect, it is fairly funny, but my parents flipped out over it. I had a friend that spent the night over at my house when I was 9. She accidentally went number 2 overnight, but instead of going to the bathroom, she just took her undies off and threw them under my bed. After she left, my mum told me my room smelled terrible and she couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Eventually, we found her dirty, poopy undies under my bed. After that, she was no longer allowed to stay over. Eventually, she invited me to her place for a sleepover. Since she only had one bed, we had to share it. I woke up in the middle of the night, soaking wet and freezing cold because she had wet the bed and me with it. I had to lay in that bed all night, just hoping that morning would come soon so I could get up and take a bath. My parents bought a full-size terracotta soldier that they had shipped home when they were visiting China. About a year later, when my parents weren't home, my grandpa painted it solid grey because he thought it looked worn and dated. And that's when Grandpa earned himself a place in the bad retirement home. When I was young, I was in Cub Scouts, and we decided to build all of our Pinewood Derby cars at my house one year. So my whole little crew comes over, including this kinda weird guy named Ricky. After about an hour of building, Ricky goes into the bathroom for like an hour, and then leaves the bathroom, says goodbye without slowing down, and walks out the front door and gets picked up by his dad outside. My dad was kinda like, what the frick? So he goes and looks at the bathroom and gosh darn, there are tiny little brown fingerprints on literally every surface of our bathroom. Like seat, handle, toilet paper, walls, sink handles, soap bar, gosh darn everything. And yes, we had to clean all of that crap up. But Ricky ended up with the nickname Dicky Turdfingers, so joke's on him, I guess. I let a guy I knew from college stay in my house for a few months because he kept whining about how his parents don't let him do anything, and I figured one more person paying rent wouldn't hurt. When he moved out, with about a week's notice, I was forced to clean 8 months of splooge stains from the wall where his desk used to be. I was watching my cousin's dog at the time, really cute West Highland White Terrier. I'd made a rainbow cake using food coloring, which is really hard to get off clothes or skin because it just gets stuck. I'm pretty sure you can guess where this is going. Well, while I was sleeping, passed out, my friends dyed my cousin's dog with different food colorings. I was real mad. It wasn't enough that my cousin's parents were picking up the dog the next morning, but they also used my expensive colors and refused to pay for them or the shampoo I needed for the dog. They'd also poured the green liquor on the dog in the hope to dye her with the liquor first. So she was a sticky color mess. The color didn't even wash off properly, so I paid for her next trimming. My cousin and her family were so mad, the color wasn't even the worst thing, it was the liquor. And no, we're not friends anymore. I had a girl who was 6 or 7 pee in my boots. I had a party with 8 friends. After they left, I went to the hall bath and noticed the hand towel was missing. I looked on the floor and noticed the crap smeared into the grout. Then I looked at the toilet and realized the crap was smeared in swirls all over the side of the loo closest to the wall. I don't know what happened and never did find the hand towel. Gross. Years ago, my old housemate's mum came to visit. I'd just done a 14-hour shift in the pub I was working in at the time. I came home to find her in the kitchen, off her face, in her tights, surrounded by broken glass on the floor and eating my cereal from the bag. She'd smashed all of the wine glasses. She was a counsellor for the Tory party as well. Housemate had passed out, so I had to deal with this wreck of a woman who I'd never met before. He was sleeping over, and in the middle of the night, I see this guy punishing the crap out of his meat. I swear this guy sent it to the frickin' Shadow Realm. Years ago, I lived in a mobile home, me and my significant other. To help with the bills and rent, we took in a guy as a roommate short-term. It was supposed to be for a week. It was my neighbor's father. I should have figured out right there when he didn't let his dad stay with him. Day 1, set up a computer in his room. That's cool, play World of Warcraft or whatever you do. Nope, he was watching cam girls at high volume. Day 2, I come home to my door locked. My key isn't working. This guy had the audacity to change my locks while I was at work. He said he didn't feel safe. Day 3, had friends over for a barbecue. We all worked at the same fast food restaurant that may or may not serve tacos. The store manager closed on Tuesdays. We were off as a group. Every Tuesday we'd eat and drink, stuff like that. So our roommate brings some chick home without giving us a heads up, and they are doing the deed. In his room, with the bedroom door open. I'm walking my buddy's 3-year-old son to the bathroom as he didn't want to go alone, and that's when we saw him. Seriously, now I don't even invite people to my house. Meet me somewhere. Nobody is coming over. Drunk friend threw up on my couch and floor, made a real messy attempt to clean it with some paper towels, and then just left without saying anything while I was asleep in my room. I woke up to find chunks everywhere. My girlfriend's old friend was in town, so he stayed with us. I already didn't trust him because he was a terrible alcoholic and was known to steal things. He stayed in her room and she slept in mine. I woke up at 8:30 and he was just gone. He had peed the bed, stole a vinyl of Elvis Presley's Moody Blue album from her wall, that was a limited edition black pressing, and we never heard from him again. He died a couple of months ago from a smack overdose. There was this kid who lived around the block who'd come over sometimes. Well, one day he found some lemonade mix and decided the best thing to do with it was dump it all on the ground and use the sink nozzle to get the floor wet and turn the kitchen into a skating rink. Why the lemonade mix was necessary, I have no idea, but that was a really fun day until my parents came home. I did a very similar thing at a friend's house when we were kids. The difference being that it was the baby oil on the bathroom floor to make the skating rink. I convinced my friend that it was a good idea on 2 separate occasions. I mean, for that second time, your friend really only had himself to blame for getting in trouble with his parents and any injuries he incurred. I mean, you've got to learn from your mistakes there. Almost every time my mum came to my house, she did something messed up. She'd break things or decide something needed fixing up and call up whatever repair or service person was needed and then just present me with the bill when I came home from work. She flooded my kitchen once, which leaked out all over my living room and warped my hardwood floors. I came home once and she had repainted my kitchen. But the worst was that she left candles burning and we woke up to my living room in flames. Almost killed us both. I live in Asia now, in a small studio apartment, so even when she comes to Asia, which has only happened once so far, she can't stay in my home. Your mom should test software. Making things break is required in that occupation. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A girl came over during a party. She'd obviously had a few drinks. First, she tried making out with me, which I'm generally in favor of, but she was trashed and could hardly walk, so we set her on a couch. She didn't stay there though. She took one of the hockey sweaters that I hang on the wall, put it on, and sat on the floor, banging her hands and singing to whatever song was on. It was obnoxious, but harmless, and thankfully she stopped, because a few minutes later she threw up all over my sweater, herself, and the floor. Not great. We got her to the bathroom, where she promptly passed out. Which is generally a good spot to do so, except when it's 10 PM and people are still coming over, and there's one bathroom in the place. We eventually just unlocked the door, found her sleeping undressed in the bathtub, in her own throw-up, happy as heck and thanking us for inviting her. We left her there, drew the shower curtain, and she either passed out or got to hear everyone pee for the night. She woke up at around 4 AM, climbed into my bed where I was blissfully sleeping, keyword being was. I had to call her a cab and pay him up front because shockingly she lost everything she owned in someone's car. Then I got to throw my sheets and blankets in the laundry and sleep on the couch. We are still friends, she's apologized plenty, but that was not a good night for her. My mum stayed with me for a week when my daughter was born. Here is a list. She broke my toilet seat exercising, stole a bunch of my liquor despite being told as an alcoholic she was not to drink in my house, went through my medicine cabinet and stole my meds, went through my financial documents, repeatedly went first for food and took all of the good yet limited items, opened several items that I was going to return, and this was on top of all the general negativity and pessimism. At the end, it was just awful having her here for everyone involved, and she really isn't welcome to stay again. I had a house party in college that was broken up by the cops. When the red and blue lights started flashing into the windows of my bedroom, where myself and probably 5 or 6 other people were partaking in illicit substances, this chick who I don't know just dashed out of my room in a panic. She returns in an instant with a jar of peanut butter and begins mushing her gosh darn fingers into it and shoveling huge globs down her gullet. At this point, kinda high on the stuff we'd been taking, I vividly remember yelling in a manner that reminds me of Jesse from Breaking Bad, "What the frick, yo?" She can barely open her mouth or use her tongue because her crap is so covered in my frickin' food, as she explains to the whole crowd that eating peanut butter will beat a breathalyzer test, before tearing out back into the night. I never saw her again. The cops were super nice, they just ask everyone to leave, and I wake up the next morning, which is when I see it. This peanut butter witch cleaned her grody little claws all over my frickin' walls on her way out the house. There are streaks of peanut butter down the hall, down the stairwell, and all over my gosh darn couch by the front door, where my pillaged jar of peanut butter lay like a cowering victim by the welcome mat. I'm still betrayed. I had a house guest who was fairly tall turn the shower head around to bounce the water off the drywall and ceiling to get the water to fall on his head. He has not been invited back. Okay, so this one time I had a best buddy from elementary and middle school come down to visit me from out of state. Awesome dude. Love having him around whenever I can. We went to visit my brother at his college dorm for some parties. My friend and I are both 21 and 22 at this point. My brother and his friends are 18 to 19. We hit the bars downtown, get rip-roared, and proceed to walk back to the dorms to crash on various couches. I stayed up until about 5 AM hanging out with one of the roommates because we'd had vodka Red Bull and sleep wasn't going to be possible for a bit. At right around 4:45 we hear running water from the kitchen and both wondered what was up. As we walk into the kitchen, We see out-of-state friend sleepily standing in front of the open refrigerator, taking a pee all over everything in there. I mean all over everything, full spray. My brother's roommate and I are both simultaneously asking, "But why?" Out-of-state friend says, "You wanna suck it?" and then goes unconscious. By far the worst thing anyone has done to anybody's place that I've seen personally. In his defense, out-of-state friend replaced everything in the fridge and cleaned it out to the extreme before everyone else woke up the next day. Probably ended up cleaner than it had been in years. All of my brother's friends say it's one of their favorite stories from college. I was the guest at my sister's house. We were getting really drunk with her husband, and her husband's friend. I needed to pee, and her husband told me to go pee in the bush behind his garage. So I stumbled over there and whipped out my junk and began to take the longest whiz of my life. About 4 seconds in, I heard a sound coming towards me. It was my sister's big, dumb, beautiful golden retriever. Jasper, the dog, is a real attention hussy. Apparently he wanted to get my attention while I was peeing, so he ran under the stream and tried to roll around in it. I pinched off the stream at great personal peril and spun around 180 degrees and let the stream go. Jasper thought this was a new game. He ran around me and started playing in the stream again. In my drunken state, I started to aim off to the sides, but Jasper was not as drunk as I was. He reacted to my evasive maneuvers much quicker than I expected. He bit at the stream and frolicked in it until my bladder was fully empty. Then, with a big dumb grin on his face, Jasper ran back to my sister. I had to follow him and tell everyone not to touch the dog because he'd just been playing water sports. My brother-in-law's friend laughed so hard he nearly fell in the fire pit. The dog got bathed and couldn't have been happier. My sister was mortified. Her husband thought it was hilarious.
Was he a golden shower retriever?
Well, the person who made that last play on words was as awful a human being as they are funny, but really, there's no way anyone could blame you for that dog's actions. I mean, really, asking a drunk adult of a certain age to cut off midstream is an impossible request. When I was a kid, me and my friends were over at a birthday party. We were playing hide and seek, and one of the kids peed in the kitchen sink because he had to go, but didn't want to reveal his location. None of us knew about it at the time, but later my parents got a phone call asking if I did it. My dad sat me down and asked me straight up. I looked at him like he had 3 heads and said, "No, I'm not 5. Then he laughed his butt off at the idea of some middle schooler whizzing in someone's kitchen sink. Surfed naughty movies on my PC and got it infected with malware. I have to assume he also cranked it at my desk. I stopped hanging out with him when he decided to casually shoplift some stupid thing when we were at the mall. No way am I going to get caught up in any legal crap because of his dumb butt. A former friend stayed the weekend with her kids. She left a potty chair filled with pee in the room where they were staying, flashed her chest at my husband, didn't feed her children breakfast, and the worst, she grabbed my cat's tail and pulled her across the floor. She got up at 3 a.m. on a frickin' Wednesday and proceeded to make a special stew. Special stew was literally every single meat from our freezer, water, and ketchup. Oh, and not to mention she sobbed loudly while doing this. Also broke 3 knives trying to chop a frozen ham. Screw you, Leanne. I'd also like to give an honorable mention to the guest that tried to kill my cat. Screw you guys too, Josh and Weslin.
What kind of people do you hang out with?
My little brother is autistic. Naturally, when there was another kid with autism who came into the neighborhood for a block party, we invited him over. They had fun, seemed like a cool kid. He asked to use our bathroom. We said, sure, of course. He was in there for about half an hour, and then he suddenly scurried out of the house and ran off somewhere. When my mum went in next, she found the walls covered in finger-painted brown. All of our white towels were covered in brownish-green streaks, and there were brown stains all over the sink tops and the rugs on the floor. But the rug was upside down. Flip over the rug and it was even more covered in that stuff. It was incredible. We bleach-bombed the place with my mum, and I never saw that kid again. They took a picture of my BV medicine and posted it on Twitter. BV is like a yeast infection but with bacteria, and it's not a transmitted disease. They let their kid go number 2 on my deck and then didn't use bleach to clean it, and then argued with me when I used bleach to clean it, and then got offended that I argued with them about the cleanliness of their kid's number 2. Their anti-vaccination stance should have tipped me off. My brother-in-law came to stay at my flat and brought his friend who didn't like dogs and was allergic to them. No problem, although I told him this was the dog's home and he'd have to live with it, but I'd try and keep the dog away from him as much as I could. I was in the kitchen and I heard him saying, "Fudge off, no, go away." So I guessed the dog was doing that thing that dogs do when faced with someone who doesn't like dogs. not leave them alone. I started to go into the front room to grab the dog and I heard a heavy thunk sound and my dog yelped and scooted past me. The mother fricker had kicked my dog. I grabbed him by the front of his shirt, dragged him to the front door, threw him out and told him he wasn't welcome in my home. The butthole kept the faucet running overnight in a plugged-up drain. The drain was plugged because it had been cleaned by the owner earlier in the day. We woke up to see water pouring through the light fixtures in the basement. The owners were my parents and the guest was me. That moron stole my oven door. Cousin of an ex got drunk and took a bunch of pills, then diarrheaed herself all over my couch after we'd all gone to sleep. Tried to clean herself by going to the bathroom. Then when that bathroom was too contaminated with fecal matter all over the toilet and all in the sink almost to the point of being clogged, she went to my other bathroom to clean herself off. It was everywhere. Walls, shower curtains, sinks and door handles. She woke me up and said there was an emergency. I got up and drove her to her car before I discovered anything from the literal crap storm. You might say that was the crappiest day of my life. What is the creepiest fact you know about the human body? If you wear a glass which vertically inverts your vision long enough, your brain will correct it and you'll see things normally. But when you take those glasses off, everything will look upside down again until the brain recalibrates again. Takes a couple of hours for some people. Takes days for other people. The inside of your cheek and your rectum are lined by the same type of tissue. Go ahead, feel. Cheek first, preferably. Bodies will move as they're coming out of rigor. I've been bumped by a few. I'm a coroner. Bodies can also make sounds as the remaining air and gas leaves. 2 a.m. in the morgue and I thought I was in Call of Duty Zombies. Good to know. I work in the ICU and sometimes patients die and we keep them in a room until they're transported to pathology. If they moved, I would scream. Our brain filters out a lot of what we see along with just straight making crap up based on extrapolation. Proprioception has always amazed me. That whole extrapolation allows your brain to estimate distances automatically and know the positioning of your arms and legs at all time. You can close your eyes and touch your nose with your finger without much thought involved. If a stroke knocks out that part of your brain, you have dysmetria, where you have a lot of difficulty subconsciously measuring distances. We don't just have one sphincter. When doo-doo comes along, it passes another inner sphincter which isn't under voluntary control. Meaning you can constrict and open with your outer sphincter, but not the inner one. And reading this, you've tried that, and that's okay. Sensory cells can detect whether you're about to pass gas or solid. From toddler age onwards, you can decide to go or not to go. If the time isn't right, like at a friend's house or no toilet nearby, the inner sphincter can push the brown tide back and store it there for later. That's why sometimes if you need to do a number 2 but don't go, the urge goes away after about 20 minutes later. But seriously, go if you can. Constipation risk. Gas can't be pushed back so easily, so we sometimes toot by accident when moving or engaging the core. Now, what about liquid, I hear you ask? It doesn't seem to know liquid, so we play Russian roulette when it's more watered down. Congratulations, everyone's sitting here now testing their buttholes. You have no idea how exposed I felt whilst reading this last comment whilst unconsciously doing this very thing. You hear that, listeners? You know what I was doing with that part of my body. Do you feel disgust? Curiosity? I don't know, but it brings me sick satisfaction that it probably affected you in some way. The front of your tongue is curious, constantly patrolling, and autonomous. It chases the dentist around your mouth and you aren't even aware of it. So embarrassing and weird and creepy. In dental school, I learned of this fact when practicing taking impressions on each other. My buddy's tongue kept licking my finger. I asked him to quit licking me and he was like, "I can't help it." Then we switched places and my tongue wouldn't leave him alone either. And for those of you that don't think your tongue does this, some of you are right. But the majority of you think your tongue is behaving, but it's all over the place without you even knowing. Oh, I'm very aware of it chasing the dentist, and I'm fairly sure trying to keep it under control contributes to my anxiety. My favorite tongue fact is that if you look at something, your tongue and brain automatically know what the texture would be like if you licked it. Heard a story of a guy who got an axe or something to his head during a murder attempt in his home. It destroyed most of his brain, except the part that processes routines. He got up from the bed beside his slain wife, got dressed, started brushing his teeth, or what was left of them, casually checked the mirror and wiped his skin of some blood with tissue. Walked around the house and collected newspaper from the doorstep, and eventually he just collapsed. He was like a zombie, unaware of anything but for his routine. Really freaky. The intestines are covered by a double fleece of peritoneum, so it's like a blanket. When your intestines get damaged for whatever reason, this blanket starts moving out of itself and crawling upwards and towards the place which has the injury. It will stay there until the injury is recovered, and then move on again. Maybe not the most creepy fact, but definitely interesting in my opinion. That's oddly comforting, really, but yeah, interesting. It's like my intestines go, "Ouch, I've been punctured," and my peritoneum goes, "Shh, shh, shh, it's okay. Come here. Here's a little blanket I made just for you to cover up that little hole. There you go. Nice and cozy. Snug as a bug. Okay, good, good." The fact that the placebo effect even exists suggests that the brain does have some capacity to force the body to resolve diseases, and this has never been fully explained. Scientists are still exploring how this ability works and if it can be developed further. When you get laser tattoo removal, the ink doesn't disappear, you pee it out. Your body's immune system breaks down the pigments of the ink and it flows into your bloodstream. It gets processed through your kidneys, and then you pee out the ink. My favorite is the blind spot at the center of each eye where the optic nerve is. A lot of people don't even know it exists, and even if they do, it's bigger than people often think. It's also really easy to demonstrate to people if you know how. It's one of my favorite bar tricks. All you need is a pen and a napkin to draw a cross and a dot. If you close your right eye, look at the cross with your left eye, then move your head towards or away from the napkin slowly while continuing to watch the cross sign, the dot will disappear as it passes through the blind spot of the retina of your left eye. If it doesn't work, you are doing something wrong. It isn't because you don't have a blind spot. Unless you're a squid, you have a blind spot. All vertebrates have them. The liver can grow parts of itself back. Also, if you get a splinter or foreign object stuck in your skin, you can hold a flashlight against your skin and shine the light through your flesh, and the foreign object will be a dark spot. Light actually passes through our flesh quite well. Also, if you shine a bright enough light into your mouth, you can see the light in your own eyes.
So what you're telling me is I can become a jack-o'-lantern.
I'm really glad so many people have gotten out their flashlights and had some fun with them. Never stop exploring and being curious and trying to discover new things. The world is amazing and has so much crazy stuff to uncover. You'll keep having fun now, and thank you everyone for the wonderful replies and absolutely making my day. If you hit your chest at a very specific time in the electrical cycle, your heart will stop. Sometimes there are just random extra muscles. You can go your entire life without even knowing it. I've worked as a mortician, and the MEs would tell me about some cases like this. Also, just random tumors, even when the individual had never been diagnosed. Lastly, skin sounds like saran wrap when peeled from the body.
Oh, that last one? Oh, you liar, take it back. I don't want to know that.
Oh, don't worry, it doesn't sound like saran wrap when your skin is peeled from the body while you're alive. I think it's just the cold decomposition process that makes it sound like that. You're welcome. You can become allergic to yourself.
Well, I'm allergic to my own splooge. I once had a bit on my stomach and it became red and itchy.
You've got a nut allergy. Your intestines know what shape they're supposed to be in, and they can move themselves, which means gut surgeons can just stuff them back into you when they're done, and they'll sort themselves out. I've had my intestine resected, like a piece cut out and then the rest sewn back together, and now I'm picturing the surgeon just shoving my guts back into me like a sleeping bag in a stuff sack when the job was done. More like he rolled them up like an extension cord and then just threw them back into your skin drawer. A pregnant female corpse will build up enough gas to expel the inner resident even after death. Look up coffin birth. I will not look up any such thing, and I think anybody who does has problems. 3 to 4 inches of the male member is inside the body. When you're thrusting, you're also thrusting yourself.
Oh, I can't believe there's more inside than outside.
I know I said it was 8 inches, but obviously I was including the 4 inside of me. We eat our own hair while inside the womb. Babies eat the lanugo, which is what we call the fetus's hair, which they shed while in the womb, and it builds up within them to form the substance that makes their own first poop, known as meconium. Oh, so their first bowel movement is technically also a hairball. It's nice to know that we're a little bit more connected to our feline and canine mammalian cousins, isn't it? The brain will always, or usually, try to ensure its survival. If knocking you out does so, then you will faint for the safety of the brain. It does a slightly similar thing with sleep exhaustion too. When it gets to such a severe point that things start breaking down, the brain will basically say, "Not on my watch," and put you into a microsleep. As an example, we've probably all had microsleeps before when we're overly tired, But the further you slip into sleep deprivation, the more dramatic they get. Your brain will trigger them more and more out of necessity, and you'll find it harder and harder to get out of them. When my sleep disorder was at its worst, I'd find myself completely unable to open my eyes after my eyelids were dragged shut by sleepiness. The more I forced them open, the more I went into hypnagogic hallucinations. There'd be pink animals floating across the lecture hall, sounds would become distant echoes, and everything would rapidly become a rainbow swirl of tunnel vision. My next recollection would be that time had jumped 3 minutes as I'd fallen unconscious on my desk. After each microsleep, the next would be harder to snap out of, because my brain wanted, or needed, to wrestle me down and hold me there. On bad days like that, I'd be unable to stop walking in the street because standing still would trigger microsleeps, and I'd collapsed once or twice before. Same goes for the bus. Absolutely no sitting because I'd wake up at the terminal stop. I'd essentially had between 5 to 10 actual restful sleeps out of the whole 365 days. The other days could be a combination of 1 to 4 hours of effective sleep. Thankfully, my disorder is now about 75% treated. The pain you feel from sunburn is your skin cells effectively deleting themselves before they mutate into cancer.
Nah, frick that, I'm not going outside anymore.
As a skin cancer survivor, good call. My dermatologist says, I wish we'd stop calling it sunburn and call it radiation burns instead. In really bad cases of endometriosis, uterine tissue can grow throughout the entire body, colon, bladder, chest, and even the brain. It still tries to shed like a normal period, but it has nowhere to go. I have stage 4 endo. It took several surgeries to remove it, but my body kept making more. Endo cells replicate aggressively like cancer. Even after a total salpingo oophorectomy, it can return. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Human beings are a cesspool of bacteria, and when you die, your body eats itself from the inside out. There are more bacteria than human cells in our bodies. Billions of bacteriophages feed on gut bacteria. It's a whole ecosystem. You are your brain, and your brain is you, yet we often talk about it like it's separate. The brain might know how it works, but it keeps that info from itself. Still, it's curious enough to ask and try to figure itself out. You can grow tumors with hair, teeth, and eyes, but no heart or brain.
I've had 2 of those. One had bits of bone, hair, and teeth. The second was half hair and half sebum.
Allegedly, your immune system has no clue that your eyes exist. Effective tomorrow, if your immune system found out about your eyes, it would treat them as an external threat, therefore trying to neutralize your eyeballs, leaving you blind.
I had an eye infection that killed my tear glands, and now I've got even more to worry about.
There's an urban myth that often your fingernails continue to grow after death, which is supposed to explain why dead bodies often appear to have long nails. The truth is that the soft tissues in the fingers and hands tend to contract as they lose moisture, leading to the appearance of growing nails.
The same reason people believe in vampires. The gums would retract, making it appear that the corpse had grown long teeth. It was thought the corpse was possessed by an evil spirit which would feed on the blood of the living, and bingo, vampires enter mythology.
Human skin is overlaid with a pattern called Blaschko's lines, stripes covering the body from head to toe. The stripes run up and down your arms and legs and hug up your torso. They wrap around the back of your head like a hood and across your face. You just can't see them. I had to look these up and it's super cool. Are you going to leave out the coolest part though? You can actually see these lines, but only under a UV light. It is believed that mitochondria were once separate living beings that were engulfed by another cell but didn't die. Instead, they provided benefit to the engulfing cell. They're a separate being. Today, the human DNA has over 3 billion base pairs, while mitochondria only have about 16,000. You're a composite creature made up of at least 2 species. Food that was consumed can sometimes take up to 5 days to fully pass through your intestines into your colon. So when people say you're full of crap, they're not lying.
Yep, we can store up to 5 kilos of number 2 at any given time.
I definitely know some buttholes that store way more than that. The pancreas is able to secrete enzymes that digest food in a very effective manner. That also means that if said pancreatic enzymes happen to spill out into a place in your body where they're not supposed to be, like from some forms of direct trauma to the bile ducts, they'll digest your insides. There's countless ways your body can just go wrong. Just out of frickin' nowhere, completely unexpectedly, something can become messed up in a way which is anything from life-alteringly debilitating to lethal. I once barely reached out to grab a spoon and couldn't move my back for 3 days. Yes. Hitting 30, I think, be the medical term. Every injury be a forever injury. The placebo effect is one of the biggest superpowers of the human body, showing how strong and weak it is at the same time, and how easy it is to trick the mind. Modern-day science still can't fully understand it. The way your eyes are shaped causes your vision to be upside down, but your brain flips the image automatically. A dead body will often move as it's being cremated. Muscles contract as they cook, after all. Sometimes this means a body will sit up in the crematory machine. Don't forget to mention that the teeth don't melt, but they actually shatter and pop. What's left after cremation is bone matter and teeth fragments, all the calcium. We put the bone fragments into a big industrial blender and break it down to a fine powder, and that is what you call the ashes. Interesting. I'm actually a crematorium tech, never once seen this happen. However, there's a fairly common amount of bowing of the bones that can occur as the fat and tissue burn off. A notable fun part is that morbidly obese bodies can explode if the direct flame hits gas pockets too quickly. Hence why we put them in head first instead of feet first, like with sub-300-pound bodies. Also, we have to cut the pacemakers out by hand, otherwise they explode and can damage the machines. But no, I've never seen a body sit up. Okay, update. Confirmed with my boss who's been doing this for a decade, and he says no, they don't actually sit up, and the cremation machine is technically called a cremation retort. As an aside, when we pick them up, I also drive delivery service, they do make noises as the body breaks down, so it's not that uncommon for me to be driving a body at night and hear gurgling and groans from the body, and that crap is unsettling. Well, the narrator is deeply uncomfortable with everything we've learned in this little detour, no matter how contrary some of the viewpoints are. Maybe the different sorts of retorts used result in different phenomena, like the body sitting up. Any cremators want to jump into the comments? Phantom pain. When someone has their limb cut off, sometimes they can feel pain in the non-existing limb. That's because sensory nerves that relay information to the brain, although cut short, are still active. So sensation from that limb is still felt as if those nerves got provoked. Your brain makes crap up constantly. Like with vision, you have blind spots throughout your vision that your brain just fills with things, through repetition and familiar spaces and things like that. It's just predicting things that it thinks are normal. Your brain, on a very frequent basis, is just winging it when it comes to what you're actually seeing. Incident number 1. I had a bad enough broken bone when I was 9 that it almost killed me. Apparently the marrow that makes blood can't exist in your bloodstream. Fun fact! Incident number 2, my orthopedic surgeon and my neurologist still don't have a good explanation as to how I have a full range of motion in my legs, like the ability to walk or even run. I've never seen a super smart guy like my neurologist just go, "I don't really know," after I'd broken my back and had nerve damage and partial paralysis in both legs. My neurologist says that sometimes cerebrospinal fluid can act as a bridge for major nerve damage, so maybe that. Otherwise, he wrote some published stuff about it that was more question than answer. All I know is that when I get x-rays done or switch doctors, the response is, "How did you walk in here?" It visibly unsettles them, like they think I'm playing a prank and my wheelchair will be hidden somewhere. I don't really care, if I'm being honest. It hurts a lot sometimes, and people can get really weird sometimes when I remind them that I can't do some things, but I can walk, so it doesn't matter much to me. Long story short, sometimes your body can do some weird and creepy stuff that even the professionals go, about? Every so often, I remember that cysts can sometimes contain hair or teeth, and I become incredibly uncomfortable. Teratomas are the stuff of nightmares. Your tongue has incredible tactile capabilities, so much so that if you look at any object, you can vividly imagine what it would be like to lick it. Go ahead, look at the wall, your shirt, or your shoe. The tongue knows. All that time as a baby built this library of knowledge.
Why do I read these facts on the toilet?
This is crazy. I just looked around the room at stuff and it is true. Brain aneurysm. About 1 to 2% of the world's population will go through an aneurysm during their lifetime, and a small portion of these people will die from a rupture. The worst part? It's got no boundaries. Literally anyone can get one at any time and just die. I'd prefer a quick death by aneurysm to a death by cancer or some neurodegenerative disease that causes many months or years of agony. Well, that's how my mum died. She was only 38. I came home from school and she was crying on the couch from having such a bad headache. She went to the hospital crying hysterically from the pain, and the last time I saw her was when she was closing the door behind her. She died at the hospital. How limited our minds are. An ant will never understand that being in my room when I'm vacuuming is a bad idea, but the knowledge exists. I'm sure there's a buttload of information about the universe staring right at us, but we'll never understand it because of our stupid human brains. I always view it as a sort of frame. A fish in a tank has a specific frame it can live in, the tank itself, as well as things it can technically perceive beyond that. The room the tank is in, for example. Anything beyond that is absolutely outside the fish's knowledge. For example, it has absolutely no chance of knowing that my kitchen exists, generally speaking. I do believe humans have a better chance of, maybe not breaking, but adjusting or widening that frame. But it'd be ridiculous to think we'd be able to know and perceive everything there is. This also applies to our own bodies as a specific frame we can do specific things with. While I can have a general idea of what it's like to be you, I'll never fully know. That and the fact that everyone does the things they do for a reason really helps me in accepting different viewpoints, behaviors, and other things. The first time a scientist discovered the existence and function of the brain, what really happened was a brain discovering the existence of itself. Saponification, the same process that happens when making soap, can happen after death and make you look like you're made of soap or wax. There's chemical changes that turn body fat into adipocere, which is a waxy substance. It preserves the body and you'll forever be a soap person. Viewed from a medical standpoint, the inside of your gastrointestinal tract is technically the outside of your body, making you a meat donut. Don't you mean a topological perspective? I don't think a doctor would consider me a meat donut, but a topologist wouldn't be able to differentiate me from a coffee mug. When you die, your hearing is the last to go. So imagine you die in a fire or in a war or something and the last thing you hear is screaming and chaos. Nope, don't like this one. Knowing this fact gave me great comfort when my husband died, to know that he wasn't alone at the end. Our minds can be tricked, and our minds can trick us. Some people sleep with their eyes open. Our memories are fallible. If you remember something from like 10 years ago, the events in your mind are likely changed. You might remember a couple of things properly, but our memories are almost never 100% accurate. On top of that, we usually don't remember the unimportant stuff. Our dreams are a product of our subconscious, from any memory, especially recent ones. They forgot to hang up, and I heard the most unhinged thing. This wasn't a phone call, but happened as I was leaving a potential rental. I was looking for a place to rent. I met the property manager, and she walked me to the unit. It wasn't the best neighborhood, and my mind was already made up as I was walking around the property with her that I wasn't going to go through with it. But the lady was very nice and friendly, and I figured at least I'd take a look inside the unit. It was small and dingy. I looked around and told her nicely that I'd think about it, and then I walked out. As soon as the door closed, I could hear her screaming, "No, you fricking won't! Frick!
Oh, I'll think about it and let you know, will you?
Oh, frick! Frick you!" I'm certainly glad that I didn't rent from her. I left a client a voicemail and I thought I hung up, but in fact I proceeded to talk baby talk to my roommate's cat for several minutes while it was recording. Oofed. My cat has a human name and I talked to him in a normal tone, so a hypothetical client would have been treated to, "Where you been, Nelson? Did you take a dump on the floor again? God damn it, we talked about this." My mother-in-law had a new boss who hated her. She was about 3 years from retirement, and she felt like he was trying to push her out early so she'd lose part of her pension and stuff. She asked me to check her answering machine while she was gone after her mother died, and let her know if anything important came in and to water her plants. The third day or so I'd been there was a message from this boss giving his condolences. Then you could hear the click where he thought he'd hung up, but he must have placed the receiver just wrong and was still on the line. He ruthlessly made fun of her with his wife for the next 5 minutes or so before saying, "Oh, frick," and hanging up. She was at a really low point in her life and I didn't have the heart to tell her or leave the message on the machine. It would have absolutely crushed her. But I did record it and then I deleted it from her machine. And then I called that butthole and told him what I had, why I wasn't telling her right now, but that I absolutely would if needed in the future, and I told him I'd better hear nothing but how wonderful work was going for her, and how well she was treated until she retired. I told him I didn't even understand what a piece of crap you had to be to talk about someone like that behind their back, and especially at such a time in their life. And that's exactly what happened. She had a wonderful last few years at the job and figured that her mother dying had opened him up to treat her kindly and with respect. That was 20 years ago, and I never told her and never will. I wouldn't want to ever take those last few years there away from her. I did not expect a tearjerker act of kindness in this particular topic, but there you have it. Not a dry eye in the house. Voiceover booth. Me and the no doubt countless organisms in the space I sit in for 8 hours a day applaud your humanity. It's not a crazy story, but I'd just finished talking to a client over the phone. We said our goodbyes, and then I hear her ask, "Are you wearing pants today?" I wasn't sure how to answer that, but I figured she was jokingly asking because everyone just started working from home due to COVID. And I just replied, "Yes." She burst out laughing then, trying to explain that she thought she'd already hung up, and she was actually asking her husband that question. We laughed about it for about 3 minutes before we actually hung up. I once worked as a secretary in an office that, for some reason, got butt-dialed a lot. During one such occasion, I got to listen in while some gentleman from New York absolutely roasted one of his employees. "Well, what the fudge do you expect me to do?" "Honestly, Tom, if it wasn't for the fact that I'm honestly going to town on your sister every night, your butt would be out of here right now." I worked in inbound calls and sales and had a pleasant conversation with a customer who politely declined the offer and told me she was going to look elsewhere. We said our goodbyes, nothing out of the ordinary. Really sweet lady. She'd called in with her husband. As soon as she thought she hung up, she slammed her phone down and started yelling at her husband. "F you, company name. Are you frickin' crapping me right now? $350 a frickin' year? I'm not paying that much for gosh darn garbage product. How the frick could that B-word pitch me that with a straight frickin' face?" I gave her the decency of hanging up myself after that, but she was 100% in the right being mad. She was teed off but vented about it to her husband instead of taking it out on me. I wish more people chose that route. A colleague of mine dialed into a meeting of 2 to 3 managers plus about 25 sales reps, only for everyone to suddenly go quiet and for one person to tell him the meeting was cancelled and he could drop, as they, the sales reps, were just chatting sales stuff. He pretended to hang up and stayed on the line. They were basically planning a mutiny because they didn't like that their regional manager was a woman. They had a whole strategy of how they were going to cause a massive screw-up that would cost the company a ton of money and make it look like it was her fault so she'd get fired. The dumb idiots even did a little, "Are we all in agreement?" roll call at the end. We worked in a call center, so his end of the call was recorded. Within a week, every last one of them was fired, and within a month, they were replaced very easily. I had a job where I was in a position to write off a substantial phone bill, which the customer said was because her mother was dying overseas, and she had dementia and needed to hear things in her voice to believe anything, including doctor's instructions. She was heartbroken and sobbing about how if she had the kind of money to pay this phone bill, she'd have just gone back to her country because the flight would have cost less, and she was right about that. I wrote off the entirety of the phone bill. She cried like a jilted lover in a rom-com and said people like me are angels from God. After I wished her a good evening and she thought the call had ended, she says to someone in a perfectly normal voice, "Whew, can't believe that worked." I called a service provider who was supposed to order certificates of good standing from a state, and they were late in sending them over. They told me there was a delay at the state's office and gave me a new estimate. They forgot to hang up, and I heard them telling their coworker that they'd completely forgot to send in time-sensitive requests in the first place. I never used them again. I have a not muted story. WebEx, 500 people on the call, right when everyone was getting used to working remotely. Whoever set it up didn't mute the audience by default. The chaos was amazing. Dozens of people simultaneously unmuted and going about their lives, dogs barking, kids crying, kitchen utensils clanging, and the call leaders pleading for people to mute themselves. My favorite part was when they had things mostly quiet, but about 5 people were still unmuted, including one guy who thought he was muted who yelled, "Jesus frickin' Christ, people, mute your frickin' phones!" before realizing that he wasn't on mute either. They threw in the towel and ended the 1.5-hour meeting after about 15 minutes. I once sat in on a similar call with hundreds of people in government. Someone sat down, loudly sighed, and said, "Great, this'll be a giant frickin' waste of 2 hours," seconds before the speaker opened the meeting. I'll admit it's not quite the same, but my parents told me a story about a long-term house guest that was problematic and difficult. When she finally walked out the door, apparently the relief was so great that my parents and older siblings started dancing around, declaring happily, "She's gone! She's gone!" only to look up and see her standing in the doorway again. She'd come back in to retrieve her umbrella by the door and had heard everything. And that's why for many years my parents would joke, "Don't forget your umbrella," to departing guests. This one's a bit cuter. My grandparents would always call me from 2 different phones in their house so we could all talk. When they'd get my voicemail and leave a message, instead of just hanging up, they'd just keep talking to each other, from across their own house. Usually silly things like, "So, what's for dinner?" and stuff like that, but it always made me smile so much. I wish there'd been a way to keep the voicemail back then. I have a voicemail saved on my phone for this exact reason. My grandmother passed 4 years ago, but every now and then I'll open up my voicemails and I get to listen to her and my grandfather giggle with each other after leaving the message for me.
"Oh shoot, Jay, hang up, I'm in the same room."
It's a sentence I'll cherish forever. Last year, my job was monitoring call quality, so I'd usually listen to phone agents in real time. In one instance, there was a caller that simply wasn't understanding what was being said. After the agent got off the phone with him, there was a 3-second window where I could still hear the agent scream, "Oh Jesus, frick that guy!" I didn't mark them for it as the call had technically ended at that point. Another time where someone had placed a caller on hold, but because of how the phone system works, I could hear the agent even if the caller is hearing music. She placed the caller on hold to call her sister and plan a vacation. Business conference call. The other side had asked some pretty stupid questions, but was still poised to do $1 million worth of business with us. Thinking the call had ended, one guy in the room started calling them frickin' idiots and talking about how what they were trying to do was never going to work. They didn't say anything else, but we all heard the sound of the other side disconnecting, and they later reached out and said they were going to go in another direction. He was fired from that position, and now he has his own company in the same industry. I think he's doing just fine. Yeah, I don't think anyone could really come up with a good counter-argument as to why they deserve to keep their job after that one. Nothing that would hold up in a lawsuit anyway. I'd pay a modest amount of cash to have seen his face when they heard the receiver click, though. Grandma left me a voicemail asking for my help with stuff on her computer. She thought she'd hung up, but she didn't, and I heard her call me a frickin' B-word. I haven't really talked to her since. After a business conversation, I heard, "I don't trust those guys as far as I can throw them." I was the third party in this. A coworker failed to hang up properly after a conversation with the boss and promptly went on a very creative, expletive-laden rant about the boss and what he should do with himself. As this went on, I received a text message from the boss suggesting I should inform the coworker that she had not hung up. I got coworkers' attention and told them they hadn't hung up. Still in expletive mode, I was asked what made me think that. My response was, "I got a text from the boss." That was the first time I ever saw color literally drain from someone's face. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My brother-in-law got a friendly reminder that the company could still hear him even when he puts the customer on hold. This was because he was taking a big old Mary J. pipe rip while waiting on the customer. I work at a children's hospital, and anything serious like code blue is called out hospital-wide over the loudspeaker by dialing a specific phone extension. There's been a few times where someone hit the hold button instead of end call, and the whole hospital gets to listen to the hold music until someone catches it. The worst or funniest, though, was a couple of weeks ago. Every single employee, parent, and child in my world-renowned children's hospital heard this poor guy scream the F word when he realized he was still on. I was in a remote work conference call which was interrupted by the unmistakable sounds of a person performing their first and second necessities on the toilet. It went on for some time, and at the moment of the flush, the meeting organizer circumspectly said, "Everyone who's not speaking, please go on mute." Suddenly, a person yelled, "Fudge!" and dropped from the call. The meeting chair was trying to be a bro, because with all the other unmuted people and mild sound of chirping birds and typing, we didn't realize who it was yet, and we'd only identified the dumb idiot by the sound of his voice and "the toilet boy is leaving the meeting" notice. Poor guy never lived it down. In the early days of Facebook, my former father-in-law was just discovering it and connecting with old friends. He was having fun seeing who'd gained weight, who got divorced, who was a millionaire now, and so on. One guy he connected with gave him his phone number, so my father-in-law calls him. He didn't answer, so he leaves a message, something like, "Hey Bill, it's been a while, just wanted to catch up, give me a call back," and gives his phone number. And then he hit the end button and jokingly said, "And I heard you got fat." He then looked down, and to his horror, the call was still active and recording the message. So it probably still sounded like, "And I heard you got fat." Oh crap, oh my god, it didn't hang up. Frick, it's still recording. Click. To my knowledge, the guy never returned that call. My friend called me for a quick question, followed by the noise of him absolutely destroying the toilet before he hung up. He was not the kind of friend to do that sort of thing, so it was hilarious. We texted them, "Make sure you wipe the walls down." I have a discount digestive system and I take a lot of work calls while I'm on the john. Usually, I'm pretty good at muting the mic on my phone at the right time. However, one time I lost all control while talking to someone. Luckily, they found it hilarious. I was troubleshooting a problem with them and he goes, looks like we're both having issues. That's one of many memories that keep me up at night.
The stupid motherfricker fell for it.
This was from a student's parent while I was excusing their kid from an assignment that they'd missed because their grandmother just died. She hadn't died. Still, the kid wouldn't pass the class under any circumstances because he was a complete idiot. Once I talked to his parents, I knew why. So he still failed the class even without the assignment. So I know one of us was the stupid motherfricker, just not the same person they think it is. We had a company-wide call with the new CEO at my old job. Nationwide call with multiple offices and a limit of 500 lines dialed in, all maxed out. Thousands of people listening across conference rooms and desk phones on speaker. The CEO was giving the usual spiel about how she'd improve the company and make great opportunities for all employees, would change the industry, all the usual stuff. I wasn't really buying it. I'd seen several CEOs come and go and heard the same promises. Crap work is still crap work. One person in an office 2 time zones away isn't going to improve work for me. Their only metric is to improve profit for the company. Anyway, someone somewhere forgot to mute their phone and obviously didn't believe what the CEO was peddling. You could hear their scoffs and mild curses in response to the CEO's claims. I don't know if they ever found out who it was, but they did make that call much more fun for me. In future calls, they were better about muting all of the lines when one of the executives was speaking. I had a boss take a phone call while he was going through drive-thru. Me and a female colleague were talking to him and he told us he had to order and then apparently forgot we were still on the line. He said the female coworker I was with was only good for her giant chest and that she needed a good eggplant in the rear end to lose her attitude. There was someone else in the car with him apparently. She left the company, but I hear she got a handsome severance package. I was working in a call center for some time, so I'd be calling around 30 to 40 people per day, which is exhausting work. There was this one particular call, I still remember it very clearly. It wasn't crazy, but the situation was rather unexpected. So I'd be calling a woman about the end of her 30s, we'd have the usual chat and she was readily replying to my questions, sometimes giggling and doing conversation outside the topic at hand. She was in a room with her daughter. When we ended the chat, I thanked her for her time and said my goodbyes. A few seconds after that, she apparently thought I'd already hung up and said to her daughter, "My goodness, he's got the most pleasant voice." I was smiling beams for the rest of the day and did enjoy the work much more for the rest of the week. A doctor's office said, "Oh, F you, Dave." I don't know who Dave is, but I'm not Dave. Well, that's quite possibly the last place I'd expect to hear an unexpected swear, to be honest, although I will be forever curious about who Dave was and what he did. If you're Dave, tell us below how you wronged that doctor. You cur. Frick you, Dave. Oh, frick, I left the microphone on. I was FaceTiming my parents shortly after I started dating my now wife. I'd had quite the dry spell and hadn't dated anyone for a couple of years. So I mentioned we were dating on the call and they were happy for me. We ended it and I just put my phone down to grab something without ending the call. Apparently my mum did too because after a few seconds I heard her say, "Well, I'm glad he's finally doing the deed now." Awkward, but I'm also glad that my mum is looking out for me.
I heard the opposite from mine. It was, "Oh, she'll leave him in a few months." I got back on the phone, played it cool, and was preparing for an opening to give her an earful before I got asked, "So, when are you making me a grandma?" Funny, my phone dropped the call after that.
Called a tech support number for a work-related issue during COVID. The guy was clearly at home, and I could hear a dog whining in the background. He got my error code straightened out, we both said bye, but before I could hang up my phone, I heard, "Who's a good boy? Are you a good boy?" I said quietly, "Yes, I am." Then I just heard laughing and he said, "I am so sorry," and then he hung up. I wanted to hear his puppy. Oh my god, he's lovely. I wonder what his little member is like. That was a friend of my mother under her breath. I'd answered the phone and told her she wasn't home. She would have been late 40s. I was younger than you would like to think. I was leaving a message for a client about data conversion services. After I left the message, I thought I'd hung up. Guess I wasn't too familiar with my work's calling software. I started singing the Mana Mana Do 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 Do, the Jim Henson song apparently. Then I noticed I hadn't hung up. So I hung up. The next morning I came in to check the conversion voicemails, and there was a very clear and professional message left from the client. He leaves contact number and says to have a nice day. There's a short pause, and then he sings the same song back in the message, picking up where I hung up when I realized I was still on voicemail. It was hilarious, and it made my day. I found out I was single this way back when I was in the army. I got the chance to call my girlfriend, and I took it. It was a nice call. She told me what she'd been up to and all that. We made plans for some leave that I'd be getting soon. We said goodbye, and she hung up. I still had a few minutes, so I just sat there, holding the phone so the next guy wouldn't hassle me for it, when I heard the line, from a male voice, "So, when's he coming back?"
Oh, not for a couple of weeks. We have plenty of time.
You're gonna break up with him before that, right?
Oh, of course.
I hung up and I felt like crap. I ghosted her when I went on leave. Later found out she had been seeing the other guy for a while. Didn't see her for years and years until one day I was taking my kid to get pizza at a place in a strip mall, and there she was, standing next to an SUV, staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. I waved, went inside, and that was it. I sat in on a remote interview. We were in the conference room with two screens, one showing me the interviewee and the other showing us. Nearing the end of the interview, I suddenly noticed my boss had seemed to develop an unusual neck spasm. He had faced the screen, then suddenly looked to the side and then faced the screen again. At the end of the interview, as the candidate was exchanging thank yous and stuff, I leant over and asked if my boss was okay. His answer was just loud enough to be picked up by the microphone. "If you twist fast enough, you can see your own ear." Needless to say, the job offer we extended to the candidate was not accepted. I worked at a call center years ago, and a customer was kind of panting and trying to sound normal at the same time. As soon as the conversation ended, they thought they hung up and they just went full-on hardcore moaning and filthy talking with their partner and continued with what they were doing before answering the phone. What boggles my mind is the fact that he answered the phone to begin with. Okay, since this blew up, I'll tell you guys another story. This time, someone from a call center called me. Some lady called, and from her voice you could tell she was a hefty kind of gal. Her voice was the heavy breathing type when she talked. Anyway, the call ended, but I didn't press the end call button, since I assumed they would. They didn't. And this lady talked about fried liver and onions to her coworker, and the way she talked and gushed over it was downright disgusting. Like, there was a lusty element in this, folks. She said she has it at least once a day as her meal. She made slurping sounds and some kind of moaning talking about it. I have never felt so disgusted in my life listening to someone describe their food. What shocking secret made you see someone completely differently? There's an engineering professional at my workplace that likes to wear pricey articles of clothing. He even sports a Breitling wristwatch, and those things are priced from around $3,000 to over $17,000 as his work timepiece. Turns out that he and his wife are buried beneath a mountain of credit card debt, and while I don't look down my nose at him, I definitely view his attire and accessories a little differently knowing that fact. There was this one girl I'd known for a long time but wasn't massively close to, who we all thought was being terribly controlled by her boyfriend. She'd tell us that he decided when she was allowed to drink, when she was allowed to go out, what she was allowed to do, stuff like that, and that he'd started to impose bedtimes for her and shout at her over what seemed like extremely minor things. We all thought he was awful and we encouraged her to leave. Then she moved in with me and I realized she was extremely emotionally unstable and an alcoholic. Within months, I found myself wanting to do, or in some cases actually doing, all the things she'd said her controlling boyfriend had done. I remember one time, after trying to remain patient with her for a while, she said one thing that was relatively minor and it was just the last straw for me. I snapped and screamed at her. I then got phone calls from our mutual friends to talk about my behavior and anger management, presumably as a result of the story being told back to them in a somewhat biased way. So in a way, her secret changed my opinion of him. I should say that I still know he was no saint. He was very far from it. In fact, for instance, he had been pretty violent in their time together, and this was corroborated by others. There were plenty of times I got so angry I felt like raising a hand to her, and I had to walk away to calm down. There's never an excuse to actually hit someone. I guess what I'd say now is that they're both pretty terrible, but I had a much less black and white view of both of them after getting to know her better. In my early days as a lawyer, I represented a sweet old widower with Parkinson's disease who was being sued by a local store for groceries that his late wife had purchased on credit without ever paying for them. I felt awful for him. And then shortly before the trial, I found out he'd done jail time for very inappropriate conduct around minors. My wife's bestie confided in us that while short on money, she was moonlighting as a professional woman who went into people's houses with leather and tools to give them services that were not readily available elsewhere. The word sounds like domino matrix. Until then, we'd thought she was just super vanilla. Hi there, audience. Why yes, I did work way too hard trying to find a way to describe this woman's services that wouldn't get demonetized. Thank you for noticing. On with the video. A friend I grew up with started dating a guy and quickly got perganinant, and married at 25 or so. One night, hanging out with her and her husband, he was like, "Did she ever tell you how we met?" Apparently, she was a working girl from right after she turned 18. He was one of her Johns, but they took a liking to one another. They've since gotten divorced. I had a seemingly innocent friend who normally kept to herself about her issues. Then one day she told us that she couldn't tell if she had a sore throat because she was sick or because she swallowed too much splooge the other night. That was the only thing I associated her name with afterwards. My uncle forced my dying granddad to sell over the family beach house for a very low price. He's now a millionaire. He created a surf school on the property, which he then went on to sell, then buying a backpackers, which has become pretty successful. Now here's a positive one. My wife, a defense attorney, has a work colleague who's the biggest butthole you'll ever meet. A blowhard who revels in winning at any cost and brags about the snarky things he does to really twist the knife. He's known as a sharp legal mind, but I get the sense he likes to try to screw weaker ADAs or other counselors and loves it when he catches them on some technicality. He makes these stereotypes about lawyers seem valid. My church had a sort of Habitat for Humanity-esque service weekend where we were rehabbing an old warehouse into a new space as a temporary women's shelter for battered women. The offices were already up, but the individual rooms needed to be refloored, the bathrooms retiled, sheetrock needed to be hung and primed, and to my surprise, I saw the butthole there with a tool belt helping to install a sink. Long story short, he donates his legal services to that one shelter, helping to set up restraining orders, divorces, custody, stuff like that, for women trying to get away from their violent partners or bad families. At first, I wondered if this was some kind of court-ordered community service. It wouldn't surprise me if he'd done something to deserve it and then teed off a judge somewhere. But no, the coordinator for the shelter who was working with my church says that he'd been doing that for the past few years. Apparently, his wife's previous husband was a truly awful man, and he has a real heart for people in that situation. I don't know if that's really a secret, but my wife didn't know about it and didn't believe me when I told her. He obviously doesn't brag about it, which is something I thought he'd totally do. In short, butthole attorney actually has a heart. The local park homeless alcoholic was once a professor of ancient history and dead languages and could speak and write in languages many of us would never even see. He used to teach at Trinity College until he was convicted for his wife's death. How she died or if he did it is a mystery to me, but one person I've spoken to reckons it was an accident, and another says they don't think he did it. Made me see the reality that no matter who you are, you could end up in a personal hell. It only slightly changed my perception, but I was about 9 or 10 when my dad told me why he and my mum split up. His exact words in a sad tone were, she was seeing another man. He wouldn't tell me who it was. From now on, every time an affair is mentioned, I give a quick glance to my mum. She still doesn't know I know. I had a work friend back in the day. His wife was really mean to him. She always would tell me his kids hate him, even though they'd run to the door excited when their daddy was home, and when she was really mad at him, she'd flip out and say that he'd done the deed with his sister, and also a pig. He'd just ignore her and not say anything back. Now, I just ignored it because she'd always try and make him look bad when she was mad at him. Well, one night we were drinking, and he was pretty drunk. His wife got mad too and did it again, but this time the heated exchange went like this. "You effed your sister and you effed a pig once." Long pause. "You know what? Frick you. That stuff happened like 3 years ago. You need to just drop it and move on. I don't deserve to have it rubbed in my face all the time. Then I realized why she held such resentment towards him, and I noped the F on out of there and never talked to them again. I feel so bad for their kids. It was a really dysfunctional situation for them. Luckily, I heard they aren't together anymore. There was a guy I worked with that was kinda handsy but generally nice all the time. I learned he was gay but in the closet. It was then that I started noticing how he treated everyone else. Kinda like a D-bag. He wasn't handsy with anyone else, so all the positive attention was him trying to flirt, I guess? He wasn't very good at it. I had a conversation with him when he asked me to lunch. I had to awkwardly explain that I'm married. I feel like I might have accidentally led him on. I felt a little bad about it, but I wore my ring every day and I've got pictures of my family on my desk. We're still on friendly terms and I introduced him to my circle of gay bro friends to help him acclimate to the culture. We became decent enough friends, but a lot of the flirt-like behavior stopped. I found out my best friend was an attempted unspeakable act offender and bragged about it to everyone but me. Also found out he held a weapon to one of his ex's throats. There are many more things, but finding this out after a decade-long friendship, I ended it abruptly. I knew he was a narcissist when I first met him, just would never have guessed the rabbit hole went as far as it did. Unfortunately, he took our circle of friends with him. He was exceptionally charismatic. That my friend from middle school was in the witness protection program and his last name was fake. I read that as his last name was fake and immediately thought, why the hell would they draw attention to it by making his last name fake? Hi, I'm Michael Fake. I guess I'm just not running on all cylinders tonight. My grandma cheated on my grandpa when he was in the war. One of her kids isn't his. Everyone knows, but nobody talks about it. As a kid, I used to spend a lot of time playing computer games with my neighbor. One day I caught him pressing the caps lock key each time he wanted to capitalize a letter. I told him the shift key did the same job, which led to a 15-minute tirade about how the caps lock button was better. We've drifted apart since then. That is one hell of a hill to die on. And if anyone says anything to the contrary, I swear I will cut you out of my life and burn your house down. Don't oppose me on this. Don't do it! I had a guy in my D&D gaming group with a smokin' redheaded girlfriend. All of us thought the redhead was gorgeous, but guy code. Until it was revealed that the slightly annoying but tolerated power gamer of the group made it clear that he thought he was next in line to date the redhead if guy number 1 left the picture. It utterly destroyed our gaming group. Redhead thought that it was hilarious in a sad, cringe kind of way, and hurt his feelings. And I personally, as the dungeon master, was aghast that human being's mind could operate that way. Like, dude, she's not a frickin' carnival prize. I couldn't stand to play or even speak to him anymore, but it was pretty clear he wasn't coming back anyway. Good riddance. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I just found out that 8 years ago, my wife, a teacher, started an affair with an 18-year-old student of hers. We had been together for 10 years and married for 4 at that point. We had a 4-month-old daughter at the time and she threw it all away. Career, marriage, and family. I had no idea anything was wrong until 5 days beforehand when I found her crying in bed and she told me she was depressed, no longer in love with me, and no longer wanted to be alive, mostly because of my drinking habits. I took sole responsibility. I swore off drinking and I had us signed up for marriage counseling the same day, plus got her in contact with a postpartum depression group. 6 days later, she's sent into a crisis center by her school, and I found out everything after the psychiatrist there makes her tell me the truth when I show up to bring her home. For those curious about how that story developed, here's a very condensed update. My ex and I tried marriage counseling for a few months, but ultimately the affair wasn't something we could get past. She was actually still in contact with the student during this time, and they even tried dating for a while. It didn't last. At the end of it all, I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot and changed a lot. Anyone who's been cheated on will tell you that it changes you, and that's true. My new wife has been a godsend. She helped me through the divorce with more patience and grace than you can reasonably expect from anyone. We blended our families. She had a very similar story to mine, actually. And despite all the craziness in the world that began in 2019, we've really thrived together. There was a woman who I considered my friend for many, many years. She had cancer, survived it, but it was still there and created many problems. She even appeared on TV shows as an advocate for cancer patients. She did a lot of political activism and was very much opposed to euthanasia. Published some books. Then one day, through a series of coincidences, it turned out that her cancer had never existed. She'd completely made it up. A big, fat, whopping lie. I'd feel ashamed because I fell for it for so long, except that a lot of other people fell for it too, including professionals. Doctors, nurses, and priests. Needless to say, it ended that friendship, and it made me think a lot about how easily fooled we all are. Oh, and by the way, she's passed away by now. Of cancer. I'm not kidding. Not the cancer she had made up, of course. Karma can be such a witch. I had a friend who hung out with two friends who were girls, and he was male. All went well, according to him, but the girls told me he said, "It's getting hot," and proceeded to take off his shirt and then just crank it and finish into a cup, got all sweaty and then just left. I could not look that man in the eye ever again, and I cut off all contact. There was this guy in my high school who was the typical big meathead football player bully. Picking fights, playing mean-spirited pranks, super homophobic and misogynistic. He was something straight out of a teen movie. My senior year, he ended up in my English class. At the end of that year, we had to do senior statements, which were basically speeches where you talk about a very painful or life-changing event that you've been through. He got up and began to tell a heart-wrenching story about how he and his brother had been subjected to some awful treatment by his father since they were kids. He hates football and wishes he could do drama like he wants to, but his father would never allow it. He acknowledged what a butthole he was and was besides himself for not knowing how to treat others. He then quietly went back to his seat where he proceeded to cry quietly for the remainder of the class. His story radically changed my opinion of him. He was the first person who made me realize that most people do deserve compassion. He still lives in my hometown, and occasionally I find him at the bar downtown. He's a good guy, much quieter now, but hopefully pursuing something he loves because he deserves the happiness. My old man used to hang nooses in the garage when I was very small as a way to manipulate my mother into staying with him. He was implying he was ready to self-delete if she broke up. This is as far back as 1990. She finally left him more than a decade ago. When I found out how awful he'd been to her all this time, I could never look at him the same way. He didn't end things, by the way. In high school, I learned my best friend would contact most of the female friends I had, generally after I'd had a falling out or just some confrontation with them, and then pester them with, amongst other things, his overpowering obsession with their feet. I learned this in senior year when I started reconnecting with some of these friends, and all of them had the same story. I haven't spoken to him since. My boyfriend, years ago, told me he was subjected to some pretty inappropriate behavior by his gay uncle, his actual uncle's partner. Yet, my boyfriend continued to see him at family gatherings because he didn't want it to affect the family and had to be nice. A few months after he told me, he got drunk and in an argument with his dad and yelled it so that everyone could hear. He and I broke up not long after that. Last I heard, his dad was looking for blood, and the ex-uncle was in jail. I had an ex. He was one of those, "I'm so gentle and kind, ooh, I love pastel colors and flower crowns, ooh," types, who went on a date with a friend of mine. This friend goes on to tell me they broke up because he admitted to getting it on with his dog on multiple occasions and asked my friend if they wanted to watch him reenact that exact activity on a Skype call. I was like, holy hell, dude, I just broke up with him because he was frickin' annoying. Well, learning that my partner did the deed with animals would annoy me, so I'd say that you could have said that regardless of which of those two ended up being a deal breaker for you. I hope you reported him to, someone? I don't know, did the cops come for a call like that? Not necessarily a secret, but I was 8 years old, it was Christmas, and our family was over at a friend's acreage for Christmas Eve. I was sitting on my dad's lap, and I placed my hand up against his to compare size, and to my utter shock and horror, I noticed my dad was missing a finger. His pinky finger. My mum and dad were confused. "You never noticed that? He's been missing his finger your entire life." No, I hadn't ever noticed it. It was actually a bit too much to handle for an 8-year-old at the time. I was absolutely devastated. In actuality, he lost his thumb while working on the oil rigs, and they transplanted his pinky finger to where his thumb would be so that he still had some sort of grasping abilities. Pretty cool, but it freaked me out so badly as a kid. My friend in high school went to jail shortly after graduation for committing the unspeakable act on and then physically attacking his on and off again girlfriend to within an inch of her life. Turns out it wasn't the first time either, or the first girl that he'd done that to. We're quite open about stuff in our family, so I've learned a lot of weird stuff about my father and my stepmother. But I think maybe the highlight was when my stepmother casually joked about my father's thing for MTV's Geordie or Jersey Shore. Apparently, my dad watches the show when he can't sleep, all alone in the night. I have a friend who gets in the mood for the deed by the idea of inflicting pain on those who they feel have earned it. I guess a literal rager for justice. Someone I knew told me that predators are discriminated against in today's society and we should just change the laws around such matters. Complete game changer. My stepbrother stole my parents' identity, opened up credit cards and maxed them out. When my parents found out, they didn't prosecute because he'd end up going to jail. They paid the credit cards off by making a settlement with the bank. If he shows up at Thanksgiving to my mum's house, my dad is deceased, it's gonna be dramatic. Brother's best friend and best man at my wedding. All of a sudden moved to Washington about a year and a half ago. We have no ties there, and neither does he, and we just couldn't figure it out, but whatever, maybe he wants a new start. Then all of a sudden he moves back to the town my parents lived in. Last Thanksgiving, the US Marshals showed up to take him into custody and to send him back to Washington. He's facing trial next month for illegal conduct with a younger person amongst many other charges. Definitely has changed the way I look at him. I have a guy friend who's always been quite popular with the ladies, despite being an average-looking guy. We lost touch for a few years, but within 24 hours of reconnecting again, he told me that he secretly meets guys on dating apps, hires male and trans escorts, and absolutely loves cross-dressing. Now, the only time we ever really speak is when he wants my opinion on some underwear or toys. I definitely feel special for being his go-to secret keeper, but he really has no filter with me anymore, and I often get more info than I want or need to know. Sibling set of cousins, my third cousins. They're two sisters and a brother. The youngest sister, she's 31 this year, and this happened in about 2009, was dating a mixed-race guy who had one parent black and the other white. I didn't realize how racist her family was. They told her to leave him immediately, and when they found out she had not only not left him, but was also now having normal, consenting adult relations with him, her siblings attacked her while their father watched, and they forced her onto a plane to the EU the next day, black eye and all. Had her personal documents seized by her sister and was basically a prisoner there. I found out about a year later when our other cousin told me. I can never look at anyone in that family the same way, and it's so sad because as a kid I was really fond of them. The older sister had a coffee shop which my dad used to take us to a lot, and I think that's where he met my stepmom. I'm not sure if this is a secret now since my mum knows and I didn't tell her, though at the time my cousin asked me to keep it quiet because it was top secret and very sensitive information. I don't know if any of the family know that I know about this as well. If any of them ever reads this, you guys suck. I met a friend's new boyfriend who told me that he had spent time in jail for 2 DUIs. He got a DUI, and then he got another one, and the judge gave him jail time. He drank a lot, but when I met him he was at least very careful about not driving. But to be honest, I did judge him for it. Pretty crappy to drive drunk. And how do you get 1 DUI and then not learn your lesson? It was something that affected the way I saw him. Fast forward 3 years and he's now married to my friend. One night I'm out with my friend and she makes a comment about his sister. I'd heard he had a sister who died, but I never knew the details. Turns out she was the victim of a violent revenge by an ex-boyfriend, and my friend's husband is the one who found her afterwards. Walking into the house, coming home from college for summer break, and he found her in a pretty awful state. The DUIs were in that first 6 months after her death. Should he have been driving drunk? No, of course not. But after I learned that, I had so much compassion for him and the terrible pain he must have been going through. People deal with such terrible things, and they don't always deal with them well. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.